Hello, good evening, Matt, DJ Gamer, and Frank. How goes it? Hey there, Winterburn. Also, I know that you're joking for the pun, but I don't think you're even that far off. We're on number 24 right now. I think we'll get started in less than a minute. And boy oh boy, we got some stuff to do this time. Alright, I think it's time to get started. We are back with 428 Shibuya Scramble. We just got the true ending last time, and with that came a little bonus. Let's go to the bonus section. You'll recall Suzuna's ending, but Kanon is straight up anime, I guess. Well, anyway, let's take a look at the Kanon ending. That's so bizarre. She's just a cartoon. Alright. Alphard Alshwa. The Solitary Serpent. The snake has lost 8 of its 9 heads. In the Middle East, the snake is seen as an ill omen, and those who take it as their name are said to be both wicked and extremely cunning. If I give in to sentimentality, I will have lost my light all over again. This whole thing really is anime? What a bizarre decision. The blue sun rose into the sky. As the girl rushed to the airport, she was met with the intense light of a summery dawn. April 28th, 8:21, Singapore Changi Airport. Sorry, the different cuts distracted me. She let out a weary breath. A shaft of sunlight blazed across her face, and she squinted her eyes against the glare. The night had been a long one, and she could feel exhaustion taking hold. She wanted to stop and sink into one of the sofas in the airport lounge, but she didn't have time for that now. Interesting. The entire Wii game, because this game was originally released on the Wii, the entire game was voice acted, but the American one wasn't. Except for Kanan? I don't know, man. Was that all just a diversion? Who the hell does she think she is, just tossing people away like that? Are the fringe groups of her own organization nothing more than Halva to her? Also known by other names, including Halawa and Halawa, a popular confection throughout the Arab world, typically made with ingredients such as sesame, apricots, or grains kneaded together with sugar and some type of oil or fat. It is said to have originated in ancient Mesopotamia. Muttering curses that seemed at odds with her young face, the girl wove her way gracefully through the sea of travelers. Time was of the essence. All she had in her hidden back pocket were some dollar bills. The dollar was the unit of currency in several countries, including Canada and Australia, but here it refers to the United States dollar, controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank. At the time of the story, it is frequently used alongside the euro as a standard currency for international transactions. I appreciate that they specify at the time of the story. She was just going to have to acquire the gear she needed on site. It galled her to be so under-equipped. The only consolation was that at least she'd been able to arrange for a boarding pass in time. Kanan refocused instantly as an unfamiliar man addressed her in Arabic. Was he a thief, or some more dangerous third party? This was a country where both one's money and one's life could easily be at risk. She had one way to find out what kind of threat she was dealing with. Which gate is the flight to Japan? Her voice was sweet and girlishly soft. The man gasped. He hadn't been expecting this. They hadn't told him what he was really in for. This girl was the natural enemy of the Serpent, a steely soldier in a proxy war, a professional freelancer who took any requests and who always carried out her mission. A mere hour earlier, she'd taken out an armed syndicate, 30 members strong. The red flowers of blood left in her wake are testaments to her rumored capabilities. The man was dumbstruck. What kind of twisted fairy tale was this, with mercenaries who looked like sweet little girls? What's wrong? Were you not able to make the arrangements? No, everything's fine, he said hurriedly. The flight is departing from Gate 6. If you're looking for your pass and your ticket... So does only Kanan get a voice and not anyone else? They're in my right pocket. That was impressive. I didn't notice until you'd already handed them off. The man gasped again. His surprise shifted to caution. With all the bystanders around, it should have been easy enough to make a handoff without even the recipient ever noticing. He was proud of his skills, but still, she'd seen right through him. Don't feel bad. At least I didn't spot you in advance. You're the man I spoke to on the phone outside, right? Kanan asked. That was quite the feat. I don't offer praise like this lightly, but I'm legitimately impressed. She's known since the moment I arrived, he thought. And she hadn't figured it out from his appearance. She just intuited it somehow. She had also immediately sensed that he was ashamed, even though he'd kept his face a perfect blank. Nicely done. I see why they call you the natural enemy of the Serpent. That seems a little premature, seeing as how I haven't killed it yet. First the girl had acted deliberately blasé. Now she was being downright cynical. She's a little unstable. And totally adorable. He had to remind himself that this was her. She. How many soldiers must she have killed? How many battlefields had she survived? Hers was the life of a professional assassin. The fact that she had retained apparent normalcy in the midst of such disorder was more than a little unsettling. The man was astonished that this was the famed rival of the Serpent. One did not strike at the snake without exceptional cunning and skill. Hers was the perfect camouflage, a mercenary in the guise of a child. Well, so long as we're on the same page, did you look into that story I asked you about? Oh, well, he does have a voice. Hey! Yes, I was able to confirm it. The director of Okoshi Pharmaceutical, Osawa, his daughter has indeed been kidnapped. We should consider the increase in cell activity on our end to be a mere diversion. In order to avoid being compromised, anti-government organizations that carry out illegal activities, as well as terrorist groups, frequently organize themselves into smaller subgroups known as cells. Typically only the leader of each cell knows how to contact the upper echelons. Thus, rank-and-file members who are exposed and arrested are incapable of leaking information about the larger organization to outsiders. The name cell is taken from the biological structure. Kanan gritted her teeth. Her latest mission, concluded just an hour ago, had been to meet with this armed group, the Serpent. That was fine. Everything had gone off splendidly, without a hitch. The job had been even easier than she'd imagined. There was no cause to get bent out of shape. But the info she'd gotten her hands on had done quite a number on her mood. The Serpent herself was on the move. Japan, Shibuya. Okoshi Pharmaceutical. Possible CIA involvement. Presumed large-scale urban terrorism at work. That message had lifted the veil from her eyes. At long last, Alphard herself was out in the open. The head of the snake exposed. I like that Kanan just already knows Alphard is a woman. Hey there, Dragon Ace. What a perfect opportunity to cut it off. But of all places to set the stage, Japan? CIA involvement could pose a problem. She wouldn't be surprised if the Serpent had already coiled itself around the Americans. When it came to the Serpent, not even the US government could be trusted to keep itself free of influence. Can confirm based on the ending of this game. And the target was Okoshi Pharmaceutical. If that wasn't a sign, she didn't know what was. Was that just a coincidence? No. Allah was Al-Qadir, all-powerful. Yet the girl frowned in disappointment. What need would he have to go so far to pen such a perfect tale? She had thought such grand acts of fate were a relic of the distant past. But she could sense his hand in these events. She'd hurried to get the intel confirmed at once and had quickly arranged a flight to Japan. Maybe she was a freelancer, not aligned with any particular organization, but she still had connections. She had many tools in her arsenal. People were often the most convenient. If they excelled at what they did, so much the better. Many individuals sought to curry her favor. Sympathizers, like the man who'd made the handoff here, who would intervene on her behalf. Groups or individual activists who favor a particular political organization or ideology, and who demonstrate support without directly participating in the faction's activities. Thank you, she said. Is there anything else you need to tell me before I go? A wakil has been arranged to act as your representative on site. Apparently, he's put together a way to get you to Shibuya. After you've landed, drop out of the hold. You'll be able to head off directly from the runway, the man said. I pray this will not be a fool's errand, for your sake. I admit surprised that our Amir holds such respect and fondness for you, Rafik Kanan. He hopes that you will not fail, of course, but should you do, that you will at least go down fighting. She sighed. Go down fighting? So it's okay to die as long as I take the target down with me? The man thought of nothing but his honor, his pride. No reconciliation, no negotiation, no submission. 3 tenets that mattered more than preventing bloodshed. Whatever designs these two organizations had on each other were of no concern to her, but even so, I don't need the warning. I have no intention of dying a 3rd time, what? For once, her client's wishes aligned perfectly with her own. Her flaxen hair trailed behind her as she went aboard her plane. She didn't look back. It's going to be quite the journey to bring Kanan into the 3rd dimension. The flight from Singapore to Japan was roughly 7 hours. The Serpent had surely anticipated that her enemy would pursue her there. In all likelihood, there would be a minimal window between Kanan's arrival in Japan and the Serpent's plan coming to fruition. She really does love sinking into new lows. The Serpent wouldn't be so clumsy as to let someone from back home in the Middle East, especially a foe like Kanan, find out about this by accident. If she let the plan leak, that meant it suited her purpose somehow. It would seem she wanted to entice Kanan to risk hope before trampling her underfoot. You won't lay a finger on me. The voice sneered at her, a backstage murmur in her mind. She dealt with the enemy's diversion, learned of the plan just in the nick of time, and rushed off to Japan without a second's hesitation. Japan was where it would all be decided. If she didn't do battle with the Serpent, she would lose yet another close friend. Had the Serpent engineered the situation simply to torment her? But things aren't going to go how you think this time. Shibuya is a poor fit for you. She spoke to herself to calm her gnawing impatience. The time it took to write Shibuya and the time it took to write Alphard were nearly the same, but the youthful and complex nature of the city of Shibuya won out. Her instincts were something akin to fortune-telling, a tendency to reimagine the world around her in a way that was neither wishful thinking nor sour grapes. She had a sense of conviction that hovered near the truth, but she knew she couldn't let herself be optimistic. The Serpent possessed a powerful venom. It was possible that even if Alphard's plan were foils, the life Kanan hoped to save would still be lost. There truly was no time to spare. Crushing the fringe group in Singapore had gone more quickly than she'd anticipated. She had planned on obliterating them at the break of dawn, but she had been struck by a sudden familiar sense of urgency, and had acted an hour ahead of schedule. That change of plans had LED led to this. She had obtained the intel just slightly earlier than Alphard might have anticipated, and had put speed above all else in arranging the trip to Japan. Right now, she could only hope that the single hour she'd bought herself would let her save her friend's life.
Maria.
I was actually wondering if it would cut to, like, real Maria. A warm red flooded her mind. They'd met 2 years ago. She remembered the day as an ordinary one. An unassuming tourist was getting hassled by the same sorts of guys that cause trouble all over the world. Kane's stash of her favorite snack had just run out, and it left her in an irritable mood. Hello there, insane buffoon. Maybe that was why she'd stopped at the sight of the scuffle. Not that she'd had any interest in helping. The men just gave off an eyesore of a color. Their scent was far too noisy, and she wanted to be rid of them. Shukran Jazilan, said the grateful tourist, her hand outstretched. She asked if Kanan would be her guide, which Kanan tried to ignore, but the young woman persisted. This girl was a person raised in peace, from a peaceful country. Kanan wasn't the kind to hold that against her, or rail against the unfairness of the world. It didn't mean she wanted to put up with it either. A Yabanaya like her was practically a different species. How could they even understand each other? Kanan was closer to an animal herself, and respectable people didn't get close to animals that were still untamed. Humans had overcome their feral side. They had become creatures of intellect. When such intellect was fostered over the years, the benefits were clear. And yet... Let's be friends, Sadiq. How about it? This tourist approached her, oblivious. Kanan could recall the warm color from that moment. It still triggered her memories. It was a pleasant color, one that she had been touched by before. This tourist, Maria, was not so remarkable as to draw the eye. Nothing about her seemed especially worthy of admiration. There was just something special about the wholesome smile she offered to the dangerous creature she should never have approached. You're very spontaneous, aren't you? Kanan smiled. There was something powerful about people who couldn't get a read on their own situation. It was the first time she'd smiled earnestly in a long while. The first time since she'd lost her light a second time. Oh, Dragon Ace, does Kanan suffer from that thing where she, like, hears smells and feels colors? Synesthesia? That'd be interesting if they're taking this literally. It would still be several hours before the plane landed in Japan. She did her best to ease her inner tension, to let herself rest in preparation for combat. Her orders were simple. Save her friend, capture the serpent. The objective was the same as it had been before. That summer 4 years ago when she'd gotten the tattoo on her left arm. That very long day when she'd been reborn as the Kanan she was now. Hello, Joshua. The rumbling of a diesel engine sounded in her ears. The color that went with that sound indicated that the engine was running well. The interior of the compartment was rife with the smell of Ramal F sand. A dangerous blue, a gentle red, a painful yellow. Those, the colors of the many people aboard the train as it chugged along. The train had set out from Al-Haditha, northwest of Baghdad, and after a journey of 300 kilometers was approaching the Jordan border. At the front of the train was an antique diesel locomotive. This was followed by first-class carriages, coach-class carriages, and also several of the women-only carriages, unique to the Middle East. It was a long train, though not exceptionally so. In some Islamic countries, where men and women are prohibited from sitting together for religious reasons, women-only train cars are common. Depending on the country, the sexual segregation may be so strict as to apply even to children. Sometimes even young boys must separate from their mothers in order to ride in men-only carriages. It was remarkable that there was a line running between Iraq and Jordan. Traffic between the two countries, especially via railway, had been drastically reduced as a result of war. Many of the lines had long since fallen into disuse, but now that the West was working towards the reconstruction and stabilization of Iraq, Japan had also helped plan a railway between Iraq and Jordan, and had laid down a temporary rail line. The train's final stop was not the border, but 300 kilometers beyond it, in Amman, the Jordanian capital. This trip would be a turning point. Sundown would see the venerable old train service come to an end. The compartment where Kanan rode was boisterous with noise and human energy. Wind and the sound of chugging wheels rushed in together through windows with no glass. As the only rail service currently linking Iraq and Jordan, the new line drew passengers from all walks of life. A freelance journalist returning from Baghdad, an Indian peddler carrying a piece of luggage larger than himself, a group of women who appeared to be members of some Scandinavian NGO. No one seemed bothered by the clamor. The passengers shouted and prattled on as they pleased. Oh, that's cool. Various sounds. Miscellaneous colors. Profuse scents, myriad textures, manifold flavors. All of these sensations mixed together as if in a stew pot, and Kanan gulped them down. Yet the stimulation they provided was weak. It was like lamb without enough salt, and so she reached into her pocket for a dose of her favorite pick-me-up, crunching it between her teeth. Kanan was in a foul mood. She was on this train to do a job, but nothing had happened for 3 hours now. So far, the journey had proceeded without incident, and she had no opportunity to act. Siam, the man she, like Siam was the name of an old country, so I don't know. The man she called Sharik had assigned her this mission. They were traveling together. Theirs was a rare team. No longer were they Mudarib and Mutadarib, master and students. They were partners now. Hey there, living corpse. Still, this was a complete letdown. The atmosphere on the train set her on edge. Despite the instability of present-day Iraq, there were no soldiers aboard, only several policemen. Supposedly, this limitation of the military presence was all out of concern for the complicated political situation, but she couldn't help but wonder if it was more a concern for saving money on soldiers' pay. The major powers touted peace while enforcing virtue when they could be bothered. This railway was just one more example of their dubious policies, supposedly established to help foster interpersonal exchange and economic revitalization. It had originally been used for military transport until public travel was more useful for somebody's agenda. This is so boring. Here we are, the carefree passengers of a modern conveyance operated by well-intentioned international cooperation. Whoever owns this outfit has grown fat on peace. Don't be so cynical, her companion said. Do you really distrust the intentions of others so much? The only one I trust is you. I just figured having you around would make our jobs a lot more fun. I'm not mad or anything. It's a good thing, not being too particular. Just keep in mind that whether we align with the good guys or the bad guys depends on the job. So-called virtue has no value unless it provides some real benefit to somebody. Otherwise, it's just a bother. Virtue. Kanan sniffed. Virtue was just another name individuals gave to their own biased sense of justice. A rigid and fanatical concept subject to any number of arbitrary beliefs. One man's virtue was another man's depravity. The very idea made her think of those interminable meetings between political factions. People puffed themselves up as wise and sat at the conference table without the slightest interest in the other side's values. To them, all that mattered was what they had already decided was good and right. Some real benefit to somebody, so they know how to profit and how to survive and still manage to not go for the money that's right under their noses? Can somebody really keep living their life like that without eventually stumbling? You need to look at things objectively. Simple moral philosophy is like cheap booze. It's easy to get your hands on, and easily makes you sick. You can't expect to get through to someone who's dead drunk. Before you can convince them of your point, you need to beat the alcohol out of them. Like by up and putting a bullet between their eyes? Perhaps, if it's the brain that's drunk. The man named Siam curled up the corners of his mouth. Though he wasn't a fundamentalist Muslim, he still detested alcohol as a tool of the devil. But his use of booze as a metaphor now was inspired less by his inner demons than by his unique sense of humor. I told you to stop smiling. It makes you look creepy. Harsh, yes, but it needed to be said. Sam's smile was a rare bird newly come to roost. The two had known each other for several years now. Back in the day, she had never known him to smile. As a change of habit, it felt unsettlingly like some sort of surprise attack. I know. I've been trying my best not to ever, since you first gave me that bit of advice. Anyway, our employer values austerity. Not smiling ought to be our general policy. Kanan herself was equally guilty of a rare display. Her own sour expression had completely turned around. The only time she expressed human-like joy was when she and Sam were alone together. Her name was Kanan. Trained by Sam, a veteran mercenary, she had just turned 14 years old. Kanan was not her real name, but a nickname given to her 2 years prior. Hers was a familiar story, that of a child who had lost her parents and her village to the ravages of war. Unlike most who shared such a beginning, however, she'd had 2 major strokes of luck. The first was the ability she had been born with. The second was that she'd met someone who taught her how to foster that ability. As a girl orphaned by war, she had almost inevitably taken up arms. Making herself useful to the powers that surrounded her had been the only way to survive. The only people she could depend on, the only ones who gave her anything, were them. They? The moment she didn't meet their expectations, she'd go back to being a mere orphan. And so, this girl, a victim of war, fell under the protection of the warmongers and was trained to be one of their soldiers. But then, she was picked up by a man, Sam, who had freed her from those who had robbed her of her past. He had no ideology. He was unlike the others she had known in her broken world, the wandering people who had formed a new nation to be their promised land, and the ones they had driven out, now wanderers themselves, who styled themselves liberators. Sam was a mercenary who had been hired by those would-be liberators, but he paid no heed to the ideologies of either side. He was a soldier who lived to fight, knowing he was unlikely to see the conflict's end during his lifetime. Kanan didn't know how long Sam had been working as a mercenary. By the time she wound up in his care, he was already a veteran worthy of her confidence. He told her that he'd been kicked out of the army, that he preferred solo missions where he could focus on his objective without worrying about fellow operatives. In that sense, he was something closer to an ancient provocateur than an ordinary mercenary. Sam was well aware of his distinct style and position. He sometimes revealed a hint of shame at the fact that the assignments he was given were not officially missions, Muhima, but instead were referred to as jobs, Yama. I hope I'm not butchering like every single one of these things. Still, he was known as a valuable asset on the Liberation Front. They were a guerrilla organization facing off against superior Israeli forces. A lone mercenary who could carry out major operations by himself, he had fit in well with the guerrilla strategy. The fact that he was disposable if and when the time came was also quite appealing. And Kanan, once Sam took her in, had grown not as a soldier, but as a specialized covert operative. That was her good fortune. The orphan's talents were particularly well suited to acting as part of a unit. She was far better at being a solo diversionist, acting against the enemy organization. And so she had ceased to be a soldier, instead training as a diversionist. She fulfilled her new role adeptly. Sam and Kanan, they worked in concert as secret agents, infiltrating, gathering intel, conducting sabotage. She learned to operate without backup. Typically, one of the duo was sneaking into enemy territory alone, while the other acted in a logistics or liaison role. Here and now, however, with their objective abilities being trained, responding to an urgent request from their employer, the two were working together as a team. Hello there, Danish. So if this train is the transport, the objective must be something big, right? No. What we're after is apparently small enough to be carried on one's person. We're not authorized to look at the contents. The first task is simply to confirm whether it's really on board or not. Hey there, Dracologist. Well, in that case, the job's done. We've both been looking around and I think it's pretty clear. This train is a bust, Kanan sighed. There's nothing out of the ordinary about it, and it doesn't feel wrong either. Either they're moving our objective at some other time, they got word that we would be here, or there was no such plan in the first place. No, the intel's solid. I trust the person who provided it. They'd received the intelligence in just 2 days prior. Even by their own fast-moving standards, this job was inordinately rushed. Member of American military deployed in Iraq has contacted a Mossad agent. Indications suggest plan to deliver and hand over weapon. The Israeli Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations. Mossad conducts foreign intelligence gathering and counter-terrorist operations, along with covert infiltration and the like. It is one of the arms of the Israeli intelligence community, along with entities such as the Shabak, Israel's security agency, which handles domestic counterintelligence. Historically, the director of Mossad has acted as the governing chairperson of these agencies. Mossad is regarded as one of the premier intelligence agencies in the world. Board Iraq-Jordan Railway and gather intel. Recover payload if possible. Destroy if not. Weapon to be transferred. Enemy escort and loadout all unknown. No logistical support will be provided during operation. It was uncertain why the enemy had chosen to move the mystery weapon along such a dangerous overland route, but the information came from a source that both Siam and the Liberation Front trusted absolutely. And the source had made it clear that the enemy forces were in a hurry to transfer this unknown new weapon. This was a tip that the Liberation Front could not overlook, and they directed Siam to act immediately. The situation was somewhat delicate, because the enemy had decided to use a train that crossed the border as their means of transport. Given the tenuous political balance in the region, the Liberation Front couldn't risk open military action targeting an international train running from Iraq to Jordan. Hey there, Meowington. Political pressure from Israel and the US might have led the Jordanian government to give tacit consent to a weapons transfer, but if the freedom fighters intervened on a large scale, it would surely invite a military response. Worst case, things might spiral out of control and trigger yet another full-scale war in the Middle East. Thus, the job at hand required utmost secrecy. The enemy would disavow involvement in any clandestine transport, and those who moved against them must be similarly able to deny any involvement. Stopping and destroying the secret payload was a job for covert agents. And so, Siam and Canaan had hurriedly boarded the train, where they'd been spending their time staring out the window. 4 hours had passed without any incident aboard. Now they were arriving at the halfway point in their journey, the Jordanian border. There, abruptly, things began to change. Without warning the train, that feels weird, I think it's supposed to be without warning, the train, which had hitherto seemed like a promise of safe passage, grew thick with the dangerous scent of an escort convoy. They're making adjustments to the train? What's up with that, Sam? I didn't hear that announced. I've never heard of that happening mid-journey. The problem is with the rails. The ones we've been running on are standard gauge. Past this point, the tracks were all 15-24mm broad gauge that were installed with assistance from the Russians. So, standard gauge? 1435mm, space between the rails. It's standard in the United Kingdom, where it originated, and due to the internationalization, an estimated 60% or more of the world's railways use standard gauge. Broad, tracks spaced farther apart than standard. The broader gauge offers some advantages, such as improved stability for cars and better resistance to crosswinds. Russia, India, and Finland are among the countries that use broad gauge, along with some parts of Spain. Interesting. In order to run on the new rails, each of the train cars needs to be lifted up in sequence, so their wheels can be replaced. The wheel exchange made for an extended delay. Each car in turn had to be removed from its couplings. Then each car was loaded onto a lift and refitted for the broad gauge tracks. This is going to take a while, Katie grumbles. I wish we could just transfer over to a train that could head on from here. Well, the passengers on this train aren't rich enough to complain about a delay in the schedule. And this way, the rail company doesn't need to change up the cargo. So long as the train and the passengers arrive safely at the destination, that's all that matters. Yeah, I suppose we of all people have no cause for complaint. But Sam, Kanan sensed that there was more going on than just the switching over the train's wheels. The train was being expanded. A freight car, clearly meant to carry goods of higher quality, was being added, sandwiched between a new pair of passenger cars. A total of 3 new cars were added. The only passengers in the 2 compartments surrounding the freight car were armed soldiers. They're all the same shade of blue. 7 soldiers per car, a total of 14. Were you expecting this? No, I hadn't thought this far ahead. Adding a new freight car, huh? Honestly, this would have been difficult to prepare for ahead of time. They were seeing a complex plan unfold, one that would be traceable after the fact, but which might be impossible to stop while it was in motion. They now face a significant force of enemies that they might have to neutralize using only the firepower they had on their persons. Based on their orders Siam had received, there was zero chance they'd receive any backup. They're definitely soldiers. Can't tell what army though. They're soldiers disguised as passengers, and if they're here with a freight car, it won't be an issue. The contents of those cars will tell us if they're Israeli soldiers or not. I see. So all we know right now is that they're not onto us? It looks like they've decided that everything's safe. Our only stroke of luck so far. The freight car transfer cast everything into doubt. It seemed to confirm that there was indeed a weapons delivery taking place. But recovering the payload was going to be more difficult than anticipated. The train transfer process finished without a hitch. Ironically, it consisted almost entirely of hitches. The other passengers paid it little heed. Evidently, they were accustomed to this sort of delay. Quite the fix our client has put us in. We can't call for backup, but we don't have a chance to resupply. Fanatics never are very good at planning ahead, I suppose. They've been stopping to sniff the air once in a while. Damn hardliners. At last, the train left the border behind. There were no planned stops between the frontier and Amman. Kanan and Siam needed to complete the job before the train arrived in Amman, which meant within the next 4 hours. The odds were 2 against 14, a difference of power so great it seemed absurd even to consider a plan of attack. Your Zaim messed up in assigning this mission, Sam. This isn't a job for 2 people. Given how black things are, we should just destroy the whole payload. We should have planted some Semtex back when the train was stopped. A plastic explosive developed in Czechoslovakia. It is clay-like and easily formed into different shapes. A similar type of explosive composition for C4, used by the U.S. Armed Forces, is perhaps more famous. It is used by many military organizations due to its durability and ease of transport. That would be dramatic, but effective. If annihilation was our job, I'd have leaned that way too. They had checked the cars pretty thoroughly before they departed. Sneaking something aboard the freight car would probably have been close to impossible. So what do we do? Taking on 14 soldiers head-on is a bit of a tall order. No, we're not going to take that big a gamble. If you're worried about our numbers, that's going to change. Someone else is joining up with us here. Kanan was shocked. She felt an unfamiliar kind of fear. As far as she had known, Sam never teamed up with anyone but her. Pardon me, but I'd like to share your seat. The others are all occupied by men, and I prefer not to sit with them. As soon as the stranger spoke, Kanan saw Sam's color shift to a pale, pale blue. A bad sign. Pardon me, the newcomer repeated. I'd like to share your seat. Her voice was low. The muscles in her arms were taut like. Come on, man. Were taut like corded rope. Jeez. To Kanan's eyes, her visage was a complex meld of shifting colors. Is this? It went without saying. This was their sole reinforcement, their third teammate. We don't mind. Please, sit. Thanks. Say, mind letting me have your spot, miss? Children should sit next to their guardian. I should be in your place. Kanan sighed. Sam, is this young lady hard of hearing, or does she just not speak Arabic? Kanan, come sit next to me. This is one of our employers, the one who provided our intel. She's an old friend of mine. Kanan said nothing. But she did get up from her seat and sit next to Sam. She'd do as he asked, although she didn't trust this woman. She didn't like the way he'd said old friend. It brought up all her natural cynicism. Charmed, I'm sure. Is this kid your backup, Sam? Yeah. No, I'm the protection this time around. She's more suited to offense. Her skills are the real deal. So is her attitude. But she's not lookout material. She only really gets going when there's someone to fight. Well, well, so she's still in training. The woman regarded Kanan with a cold gaze. She gave the impression of a snake trying to sense the body temperature of potential prey. He's cute. I approve. How's her left arm? Can she move it alright? Or has your little lady in training not learned how to take care of herself yet? Kanan glared sidelong at the woman. She wasn't offended by the remark itself. The fact was that her left arm was still in pain. What unsettled her was this woman's powers of perception. able to detect Kanan's injury through the heavy cloak she wore.
動くよ。
It's just a scratch. It won't be a problem.
そう。
Okay, but how did it happen? Did you get injured before or after you boarded the train?
それでお前がまだ
That'll tell me whether you're just half a soldier or simply a fool. Kanan did not reply. The silent treatment, huh? Hey, Sam, which is it? He didn't answer. Had she seen something in that silence? Ah, of course. This stranger could read Siam's silence better than anyone. Better than his own partner. The woman's stoic face grew just a shade brighter. Her smile was entirely sarcastic, but at least it was a display of human emotion. It was a smile as if to say, well done, as if Kanan's injury were some fated thing. I'm guessing she's a war orphan. Seems you don't learn either. How long since you started working on her? I took her in 2 years ago. 2 years ago. 2003. The Middle East. A war orphan. All that information taken together left no question about just what battlefield she'd seen. The Iraq War. She had lived through the long night of a war that for the winning side had been little more than a display of overwhelming resources and overwhelming technology. That's a relief. She's only half a person, but at least she's ready. I'm looking forward to seeing her skills in action. If you brought her along, Sam, her training must be sufficient. Now that she'd inferred Kanan's background, the woman's enmity seemed to abate. Their initial reluctance to trust each other had apparently been mutual. Kanan wasn't necessarily happy, but if this was the team Sam wanted, she would accept it. As the woman had observed, Kanan had been trained by Sam after all, and Sam's judgment was absolute. Kanan knew him as her instructor and mentor, the ideal soldier, utterly reliable. She turned her gaze away from the woman and looked out the window. The passing scenery drew out her memories of the life she'd lived over the past few years. A girl who had lost all her relatives to war. The tale of a child who had never held a gun before, becoming a full-fledged soldier at the heels of a veteran mercenary. All of it came hazily drifting back into her mind. All the life I'd had before was taken away by the war. The echoing of gunfire in the distance, the sound of buildings ablaze. I couldn't help but think how much smaller and simpler those sounds were than I'd imagined them to be from stories. No place had seemed safer to me than my house, and it was reduced to ruin by a single artillery shell. A few moments after that blast, a group of strange men came barging in. I could hear their heavy footsteps, their coarse voices muttering. They're dead, we've killed them, we've killed them. Luckily for me, my father had been thinking quickly and had sent me into the basement. Unluckily, he and my brothers were still in the living room when the blast hit. It wasn't just the furniture that was now gone without a trace. I sat in the basement thinking. From the men's conversation, I realized that they were looking for my father's corpse, my older brother's, and my own. I can remember every word those soldiers said. Something had clicked in my mind as I listened. I committed to memory how many men there were, what their voices sounded like, what names they called one another, so that I would never, ever forget. Focused on hearing their every word, for the next hour I felt neither fear nor boredom. I gathered that there was no trace of my father's body, but they had found my older brother's. Satisfied, the soldiers left. All this happened when I was 12 years old. Trapped under the rubble, it was days before I was rescued. I'd lost my family and any place to belong. The adults who found me realized that I'd suffered emotional scarring, but they didn't have the time to bother with that. They're dead, we've killed them. Ah, yes. There are too many things one needs to do in life. In my case especially, I expect I'm going to be overworked. It was quite simple, the reason I took up arms. It was not atonement that I sought, but equal compensation for what I'd lost. Unjust usurpers, deeds whose cost was reckoned in blood. I have still not been paid what I am owed. The balance must be settled. I only ask as much as they took from me. That is why I carry on, never resting, with the relentless precision of a machine. It is simply a tale of sorrow giving way to resentment, giving way to cold reason. Was it odd that I never felt malice? Perhaps I could see too clearly. I could see things on a broader scale than others. Could see where the evil was, where the flaws were. could see it all so clearly that I was dumbstruck into sheer objectivity. The weak are evil. My family, my father, people I should have been proud of, had too many flaws. People of conscience, who esteemed a righteous society, who embraced complicated and contradictory things, who tried to become good sheiks. An Arabic word denoting the leader of a tribe or a wise man. An honorary term of respect for someone who commands trust. In the modern day, it is often used to refer to scholars, community representatives, and people in high-ranking management positions. Their many failings created enemies, invited war, and brought on their defeat. Violence was a vulgar thing, far beneath the cultured behavior of my father and brother, but it still had the final word over them in the end. We may have been cruel to those who would shame us, yet we had tolerated too many of these foreign invaders. Balance is key. One must clad oneself in complexities, yet be simple at the core. Taking action always requires a first step. If someone takes from you, you take it back. If they kill you, you kill them back. Action and reaction. We should have thought more simply. By perceiving everyone different than ourselves as our enemies, we brought on the war long before it was inevitable. Even if my father and brother had been operating in a vacuum, they probably would have done the same. But every family has so many kin to hold dear, so many others who cloud their perspective. Except for me. Ha! My family and my kin are utterly gone. Apart from the determination I already possessed, I knew I needed to hone myself. My growing skills as a soldier were necessary for me to achieve my goals, and more basically, necessary for me even to survive. My goals. In the beginning, that was all I really thought about. Once I'd become an orphan, I resolved not to rely on anyone. My trauma wouldn't let me trust anyone else. And yet, eventually, I wound up feeling a sense of trust for this man who found me and committed 2 years to training me. It was something I never thought I'd feel again. There probably isn't anyone around with the patience to train a complete novice. I wasn't qualified, but I wound up sticking with you. Sam was always more freelancer than soldier. He belonged to a liberation movement, but he made his living taking on jobs as a reliable mercenary. Refers here to the Palestinian Liberation Movement, a political movement formed in response to the conflict arising between the newly resettled Jewish people and the pre-existing Arab Palestinian residents, advocating freedom of the Palestinian people from Israeli rule. There has been a long, recurring cycle of terrorism and revolt, followed by periods of peace, but to this day, the issue remains fundamentally unresolved. I guess his role gave him a lot of freedom, because unlike a grunt who simply fired guns, he was allowed to act as a sort of instructor. He had no close ties within his organization, which was convenient for me. I'd taken up arms not because of any ethnic conflict, but for my own personal cause. I'm being compensated for teaching you, but that doesn't make this some kind of formal contractual arrangement. Neither of us should waste the other's time. If I decide you're not suited for what I'm teaching, I'm calling the deal off. Luckily for me, Sam ignored my unique background and upbringing, and simply trained me to be a fighter, growing as an instructor along the way. Good firearms will not limit your abilities. Automatic weapons act as equalizers for soldiers on the battlefield. If both sides have equal technology, then everyone is theoretically capable of the same things as everyone else. Conversely, if you have a gun that isn't up to modern standards, you'll be weeded out first. The first thing you need to learn is the skill to tell whether the weapon in your hands is superior or inferior. Guns are simple. Not nearly as complicated as people. You just pull the trigger. My father had handled weapons occasionally, but never showed me how to use one. Political struggle was his preferred form of conflict, and in the end, it was his bias that defeated him. I took up guns to avoid repeating this mistake. But also, the feel of a metal grip in my hands seemed to suit me. At least, that was how it always felt to me. Maybe my fondness for weapons was deliberately ingrained into me by Sam's instruction. Don't forget that you're a woman. However superior your skills may be, you cannot change your physique. If you're facing multiple opponents with a pistol, shoot at the nearest target twice. Even if you don't hit, pivot with your knees and fire the next enemy. Keep them all engaged, don't let them get close. I mastered the basics that first year. I say this not out of any excess pride or self-confidence, but I was measurably the best of the soldiers other than Sam himself. After that, Sam and I began working jobs together. Sam was against it at first, but I had the ability, and he at least had the objectivity to acknowledge that fact. He was an exceptional teacher, and I was an even more exceptional student. I was an ideal subordinate, an inhuman combatant willing to use whatever I deemed useful to get an edge. I had countless brushes with death out on the battlefield. The reality of war is that people die regardless of their tech, their experience, their abilities. I ought to have accepted that reality when I lost my family, but it was the battlefield that made the truth completely clear. The society into which I'd been born seeks to assign value not just in monetary terms, but for individual dignity and even ideologies. But only death is truly impartial. I was able to survive through all of this, largely thanks to Sam's aptitude. He wound up protecting me countless times when my inexperience put me in peril. His intervention was not out of any fondness for me, but rather a cool calculation in the interest of completing the mission. He knew I could be counted on. Never much to look at, he accrued even more scars in the course of rescuing his risk-prone students. There was almost no place that he hadn't been shot, except somehow in the head. Maybe there was a trick to that? I wanted to ask him secretly, but there was no allowance for questions while he was my shield. I could only make such small talk once his time as my protector had come to an end. And even then, up until this very moment, there had never been a good time to ask. I had just wound up believing that Sam would never die, that no matter how many times people opened fire on him, he simply wouldn't get hit where it really mattered. That was all probably a delusion on my part, of course, but the fact was that he just didn't die. Of course, his heart had already died some time before. Bullets couldn't kill someone who was already dead. He deserved my trust. We were of the same breed, he and I. Sam would always have my back, no question. Every once in a while, a truly exceptional soldier turns up. Superhuman. Keep up your mercenary career long enough, you'll run into one sooner or later. My training was complete. I was no longer a student, but a mercenary, and this is what Sam had to tell me? I responded with sarcasm. What was this, some Hollywood script? Sam had never really joked with me before. No science fiction. This is as real as it gets. On the battlefield, individual gear and skills can only carry a soldier so far. Death comes for us all equally. My turn could be next. After that might it be you? Come on. After that it might be you. You know? But in the midst of that sort of deadly equality, there are monsters who can overturn the balance. Sam went on to tell a story of two soldiers, one wielding a revolver and one an automatic handgun. The wildly anachronistic revolver was no match for the automatic. Even disregarding magazine size, a higher rate of fire meant superior firepower, period. A machine pistol capable of firing 3-round bursts would turn the revolver user into Swiss cheese. Machine pistol. Typically refers to a handgun capable of automatic or semi-automatic fire, though frequently also denotes a weapon between the size of a pistol and a submachine gun. Because of their comparatively limited magazine capacity, such weapons are not, however, capable of the high volume of fire of a full-size machine gun. Famous models include the Beretta M93R and Glock 18. Some modern automatic weapons are equipped with a switch that allows the option of firing 3 bullets each time the trigger is pulled. Compared to full auto mode, in which the weapon will fire continuously for as long as the trigger is held down, firing 3-round bursts allows for better conservation of ammo and control of the weapon. It's not about the technical limitations of the revolver versus the auto. It's about our awareness of those limitations, and at the same time, about our own limits as soldiers. Sam went on, talking about how similar weapons could equalize the abilities of soldiers, and about those who had removed that collar from themselves and deviated from that equilibrium. For instance, the unparalleled gunfighter capable of rapid fire like that seen in a Hollywood Western, a type of character who'd actually existed. Experts who could fan the hammer, unloading 5 shots at a target in the span of a single second. Of course, simple rapid fire alone wasn't worth fearing and had to be accompanied by the skill to put it on target. Sam had probably just been trying to offer an explicit example of a time when exceptional human skill could surpass the capabilities of the available hardware. It had all seemed too fantastical, but he had been dead serious. Apparently he'd run across such rule breakers in the past. Born warmongers, patron saints of small arms, lucky souls, people with different physical capabilities than you or me. Natural differences in physical prowess, sure, but also talents perfectly suited for war, maestros of the battlefield. Soldiers far outside the norm who could accomplish things no single soldier should be able to. When you need an enemy like that, it's like staring down a storm. Still, even according to Siam, such supermen could only deal with 3 or 4 opponents within any given moment, so assuming you had 5 or more to attack them in that moment, there'd be no problem taking them down. I was relieved. He wasn't talking mere fiction, but he also wasn't just telling some joke. So then, what was his story all about? You're not a super person, but you are superb. And moreover, you know yourself. Still, that's all the more reason to be on your guard. Don't misjudge your body's limitations, and don't depend too much on your own skill. You are complete. So long as you have a proper grasp of your own capabilities, you won't be defeated. Thus did Siam acknowledge my ascendance to the status of a warrior. It was an achievement to be proud of, to be seen as his sole peer, as a combatant. Perhaps even as better. More than anything, the esteem I held for Siam was a reflection of the esteem he showed me. We were the same. That's why, when the time came, I had scarred my left arm. I wanted a physical symbol of our connection. This is some long ending, though. I guess the 4 hours are up, it's nighttime. Introductions were a simple affair. Sam had no need to give his name, Kanan had no interest in the woman's, and the woman seemed satisfied with what she knew of the other two. Shall I just call her Sam and young lady then? The newcomer asked. Sam shrugged. If you're okay with that, what name are you going by now? Ah, yes. I suppose we'll need to coordinate. Jesus, come on. How does Kanan work? Kanan couldn't suppress a sound of irritation. She tugged wordlessly on Siam's coat, like a pouting cat, staking a claim to what it wanted for its own. Sorry, but that might pose a problem, Sam replied. I'm joking, the woman said. I'm actually going by Sadaka these days. In Islam, this refers to the act of giving spontaneous voluntary charity to the needy. It is distinct from zakat, a form of obligatory almsgiving. Now then, shall we get down to the matter at hand? Sadaka explained how the job would unfold. They'd wait until the train had traveled for an hour beyond the border before moving against their objective. Hopefully they could finish the mission an hour before their arrival in Amman. Kanan peered at Sam's face as he and Sadaka spoke. His color was, as always, blue. That shift earlier to an unluckier color, the cloudy whiteness of an unfamiliar stranger, had lasted only for a moment. Our objective is in the freight car, number 3, Sadaka explained. 7 guards apiece are stationed in cars 2 and 4 to either side. It looks like 2 of the guards from car 4 leave to patrol the back end of the train at set intervals. And speak of the devil... Without even shifting her gaze, Kanan could confirm the presence of 2 soldiers moving through the car in which she sat. 2 blue blotches passing by, the color of alert escorts. A rending, inorganic blue. The color of fighters skilled in the use of the guns they carried. People who were this color usually rubbed Kanan the wrong way, just being near them made her uncomfortable. Sam was a contradictory counterexample. Despite his dangerous hue, he eased her nerves, but whether the colors expressed themselves as painful or gentle didn't mean anything. The colors were merely colors. Whether warm or cold, everything was done neatly in simple colors, as if painted with run-of-the-mill materials. The last car on the train is also a freight car, but everything in there is ordinary goods. If worst comes to worst, we could conceivably hole ourselves up in there, Sadaka said. Of course, if someone were to toss in a tear gas grenade or something, we'd be done for. Let's try to stay away from any direct conflict, Sam said. The orders were to avoid casualties and eyewitnesses. Agreed. We infiltrate the freight car. The enemy won't know we were ever here until the train arrives in Amman and we're already long gone. Over and done. Perfect. Let me just confirm then, Sam replied. We've established they're transporting the weapon. Now our objective is to recover it and get out. Any changes to that? Nope, none. You do your part and I'll do mine. It had been just over 5 hours since they'd boarded the train. Kanan felt a sense of relief that at long last, the action she'd been anticipating would finally commence. Their objective was to recover the parcel in the freight car toward the front section of the train. They would infiltrate the car without alerting the guards, acquire the payload, and then disembark from the train as if they were just normal passengers. Top priority was acquiring the item. Secrecy was secondary. If it turned out that they needed to take the payload by force, they'd been given permission to initiate combat. Violence was definitely on the table. If it came to that. If they were detected, they'd wind up in a 3-on-14 shootout aboard a train.
Okay.
Okay, Kanan said. I know what you and I are doing, Sam. What's her job, though? Why is her sponsor even here in the first place? She's a code-breaking specialist. Ordinarily, they wouldn't have sent the sponsor personally, but time was of the essence. When the plan fell into place yesterday, she was the only operative available to make the rendezvous. And so they sent a code-breaker? Don't be like that. She's an expert at what she does. This will be a good experience for you. How not like you, Sam, Sadaka said. I guess the rumors about you going soft over some kid were true. She's just causing me an epic amount of trouble. Why, is that the sort of story that's been going around? No, we just heard you picked up some extremely capable individual named Kanan. I didn't expect you'd be like this young lady here, though. Huh. Well, I didn't know someone like you was our sponsor, Kanan replied. Not that we've seen much of you over the past 2 years. You got the wrong idea. I'm only one of many of your supporters. I'm not a mentor. I don't have the time to play an individual part in every little scuffle. Yeah there, Sean. But you've got time to show up in person for a job like this? As it happens, I do, Sadaka replied. I was already nearby, dealing with another matter. And given the details of this mission, I couldn't simply ignore it. I wish you had. Sam and I can handle this on our own. The enmity between the two had become like a steady rhythm, driving along their conversation. It did make them interesting to listen to, for better or for worse. What do you mean by another matter, Sadaka? Sam asked. Were you here because there was some problem? Oh ho! Kanan was intrigued. Sam wasn't the kind of person to ask irrelevant questions. Had he twigged something that might affect the mission? Whatever the case, Sadaka smiled pleasantly. An issue cropped up in one of our projects. I've been looking into the personnel involved along with a flaw in a weapon. Here's an example. How would you feel if you were dealing with a gun that you expected to be quite lethal, but which an observer claimed had no effect whatsoever? What's that supposed to mean? You're not talking about a flaw there, Kanan said. That would just be a completely defective piece of hardware. Yes, young lady, exactly. When there's a defect in something you've always trusted, it affects that trust. You could ignore it and hope it won't cause you trouble, but you're better off ridding yourself of something that isn't up to snuff. When such a situation arises, I head on site, assess whatever problems there are, and recommend appropriate courses of action. It's a boring job. These days, I'm basically a maid. Less a code breaker and more a risk breaker, you could say. I see. So you act all important, but that doesn't change the fact that you're just running errands. Through a battlefield, yes. Sadaka brushed aside Kanan's insult with an air of confidence. Kanan scowled. The woman was so sure of herself. She turned away and gazed out at the scenery outside, and then she realized the snack she'd been gnawing on was gone. Oh, is it Sam? Kanan hissed. Take it easy, Kanan, Sam said. I know you're under a lot of stress. Sam? Sadaka interjected, or is it Sham? Do you mind if I interrupt real quick? As long as you keep it quick. Sure. So I noticed your partner's been nibbling on something. What is it? Some kind of new snack? Hey there, Jay. That's right. Wanna try some? Without saying anything, Sadaka took one of the offered treats. She tore open the paper wrapper on one end, then stuck the contents between her teeth like a cigarette, just as Kanan had. Kanan watched her resentfully, knowing what she was tasting. A simple, unpretentious sweetness, the purity of concentrated sugar. Sugar? Sadaka said. Is that really all this is? Yes, hardened sticks of sugar. They're driving formed into shapes. We've become big fans ever since we found them on the market. Nowadays, they use injectors to shape them. The best ones come from Japan, I hear. Kanan focused on gnawing her own stick, not really listening to Shamu's explanation. There was a brief silence. Sadaka let out a sudden sniff. You have strange tastes. You really like these things? Yeah, I like that there's nothing to get in the way of the flavor. Sadaka raised an eyebrow dubiously. The time had come. They got up from their seats without a sound. Draped in their hoods, Kanan and Sadaka made their way through the train, doing their best to draw no attention. Sam put together a timeline. They should spend no more than 30 minutes at most on their infiltration. In addition to the soldiers stationed in the passenger cars, it was possible that the enemy also had lookouts disguised as normal passengers. A seat left open for too long might arouse unwanted suspicion. The team needed to sneak into the freight car, obtain the payload, and return to their seats without a single minute wasted. Sham was too tall and muscular to be well suited for infiltration. He would hang back and act as the girl's rear guard, and if the operation was discovered, his task would be to secure an escape route for them. We're in position, Sadaka called on one of the tiny voice-activated radios that the three carried. Synchronized watches. She and Kanan prepared to make their way to their final objective in the freight car up ahead. Despite their clashing personalities, they moved almost like twins as they went about their work. It was evidence that their Oh, I was wondering if it should be evidence, but I guess evidence is fine. It was evidence that their training had instilled them with similar priorities. Just so I'm clear on this, Sadaka said, all you're bringing is that Beretta and one spare magazine? Yeah. Hope you're okay with that. Yes. If it comes to a firefight, I'll let you handle shooting back. My job here is code breaking. As long as I have my PC and someone to cover me, I'm good. Both of them were going in with a minimal loadout. As a covert agent in enemy territory, that made Kanan uneasy, but then, if a fight did break out here, the mission was already a partial failure. The organization couldn't spare equipment for a team. They'd only needed it if they fouled things up. Hello there, Kokami. Have you checked the route? The route's fine as long as you're fine. This isn't going to be desk work. Not my specialty, but an acceptable level of risk. This isn't my first rodeo. What about you? You ready for this? I've ridden my share of wild horses, and once I get on, I don't fall off. Quite the swashbuckling little hero, aren't you? Let's get this circus started. The garb that the two girls wore under their cloaks was quite different from the norm for Middle Eastern women. Aside from the fact that one wore red and the other black, their outfits are rather similar. Both of them are dressed for maximum freedom of movement. No problems with the infiltration route, Sadaka reported. We're on the move. With all the casual air of a traveler going for a stroll, and without any hesitation whatsoever, she headed for the outside of the train. No problems with the infiltration route. We're on the move. The call cut out. From here on, the team would retain radio silence except in cases of emergency. As the girls back up, Sam had to decide on the course of action. He could try making his way through the inside of the train, heading straight toward the sequestered freight car. It would make him obvious, but that would at least draw the guards' attention onto him for a time. He had no intention of trying to get into the freight car himself, of course. His goal would be simply to draw the guards' eyes. He claimed to be on his way to meet a friend. The guards would be sure to intercept him and try to usher him away from the freight car. While that was going on, Kanan and Sadaka would hopefully be able to sneak inside. But it seemed that wasn't going to be an option. There were no ordinary passengers in the cars that the guards were posted. If the thing they were protecting was what Sam thought it was, these guards would be good. Any unusual action he took would provoke them and only heighten their alertness. He didn't want to do anything to complicate things for the girls. He decided that his best course of action was just to stay ready in case things went bottoms up. He checked the gun he'd hidden at his feet, then he pictured in his mind the guards in the nearest compartment, their builds, their gear, their positions. Hey there, Raphael. Veteran fighter though he was, he could think of no good way to make up for the sheer difference in numbers. If a fight did break out, it would still be 1 against 7. To break through an enemy position held by soldiers who knew what they were doing, he'd have to completely abandon his own better judgment. Those who are willing to rise above themselves can overcome any stroke of luck. Beta? He was reminded of a story he had been told as a student, a fable involving a board game. Life was represented by the board. There was a clear, defined endpoint. One proceeded toward that end, but dire pitfalls had been set up on the way to the goal. It was a valuable lesson. One shouldn't have a goal in life. Or rather, one shouldn't think of the end as the goal. The proper way to live one's life is to realize it was already over. One must focus on the moment. This game was striving for the goal, for the end. That was just a way of rushing headlong toward one's death. The priorities were backwards. One shouldn't have a goal in life. One shouldn't seek meaning in oneself. To seek reward, to seek proof that you've lived by achieving some hypothetical endpoint, that was a fool's game. Sam's ability to live without hunting for such proofs was one of the very few things on which he prided himself as a mercenary. Slipping his gun out of its hiding place, Sam narrowed his eyes slightly. Until now, he had been a lone soldier, put to use however his employers deemed necessary. He held no tenets, no opinions. He acknowledged that he was an instrument of war. He acknowledged that this was an age where such instruments were necessary. How many battlefields had he passed through? He could see no value in trying to sum up such experience with some complex, ever-shifting philosophy. There were those who would wage war, and those who would try to end it, and tools were necessary for both of those ends. That was all the justification a soldier required. Warriors fought, and then they died. There was no room for anything resembling a normal life. That's who they were. Demons, not men. To Sam, to this mercenary, this was a simple fact. His watch showed that 6 minutes had passed. 24 minutes to go. By then they would all know if they had failed or succeeded. It was too long, and yet too short. A gulf of time for him to fill with his own rusting memories. He had been born into an age of enduring conflict. 1948, the First Arab-Israeli War, which started with the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel. In response to the Israeli Declaration of Independence of 1948, the 5 nations of Lebanon, Syria, Transjordan, Iraq, and Egypt, later joined by Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Morocco, declared war and marched on Palestine. Armistice agreements were signed in 1949, with the ultimately triumphant Israel taking control of most of Palestine. Over 800,000 displaced Arab refugees. A conflict between those who had formed their own nation at the end of their wandering and those who would now never be able to return to those lands. 1956, the tripartite aggression over the Suez Canal. Any attempts at negotiation or diplomacy were ineffective. The Middle Eastern hegemony shifted into the hands of 2 nations, further deepening their turmoil. In 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser declared the nationalization of the Suez Canal. Opposing this move, the United Kingdom and France backed Israel in an invasion of the Sinai Peninsula, leading to a violent conflict with Egypt. In 1957, the US and Soviet Union intervened, arranging a ceasefire. And then, 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization was formed to retake its founder's rightful homeland, his homeland. An umbrella organization with the goal of the liberation of Palestine from Israeli control, abbreviated PLO. After Yasser Arafat, founder of the PLO's dominating faction, Fatah, became chairman, the organization took on the de facto role of the Palestinians' government in exile. The Oslo Accords of 1993 saw governance centralized into the interim Palestinian National Authority. Following the death of Arafat in 2004, Mahmoud Abbas assumed the position of chairman of the PLO, as well as president of the Palestinian National Authority, the peace process still ongoing. 4 years prior, he'd been born in a region west of the Jordan River. Like the other men of faith who had thrown themselves into the liberation movement, he too had chosen a path of belief. But his beliefs were too rigid, too severe. He did not know or value compromise. He'd learned to focus on what he could accomplish as a soldier and strove to become one of the elite, in order to end the fighting as soon as possible. He believed that this was the very best that he could do. The organization he'd joined in his teens was small, but it had affiliated itself with the PLO, and then joined up with Colonel Gaddafi's camp, which had provided its members the necessary soldier's education. The former supreme leader of Libya, seizing power in a 1969 coup d'etat, he is perhaps best known for his radical anti-Western rhetoric during the 1970s and 80s, as well as rumored backing of various terrorist groups. In the latter part of his life, his relationship with the West gradually improved. He played a leadership role in the formation of the African Union, AU, in 2002, becoming its chairman in 2009. Gaddafi was deposed and killed in 2011 by rebel forces in the Libyan civil war. Infighting, however, gradually reduced the organization's numbers. He had used the '82 Lebanon War as his opportunity to temporarily distance himself from the PLO and had thrown himself instead into the fighting in Afghanistan. 1982 war, in which Israeli forces invaded the neighboring country of Lebanon to retaliate against PLO forces present there. PLO leadership moved to Tunisia, and a multinational force was installed in Lebanon, with the United States providing its core constituents. That was when he'd acquired the name Sham. He'd acted as a military instructor for Islamic volunteer soldiers from Thailand. His students had bestowed upon him the former name of their kingdom. So it is Siam, isn't it? When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, Muslims from all over the world joined up as volunteer soldiers to fight the Soviets in the name of jihad, or holy war. After the withdrawal of Soviet forces, these volunteer soldiers did not completely lose ties with one another. Some of them went on to form international networks, such as Al-Qaeda. A new name, and when he accepted this new moniker, something that represented something other than himself. He had ceased to be the young man who had sacrificed himself for his ideals. At the request of some former acquaintances, he returned to the PLO in 1990. Yet again, infighting had brought the organization to the brink of collapse, and he'd been tasked with helping to restructure it. It was around then that he'd reached his current standing. The sub-organization that he belonged to was in dire financial straits, and so to keep it solvent, its members had begun taking on mercenary contracts for covert ops from the PLO and Islamic extremist groups that were former affiliates. He'd been a soldier for over 30 years. Through all that time, he had fought, and he had survived. The fighting had honed him on every level. Much of it had been purely mercenary, to secure funding to keep his organization afloat, but he recognized that as being meaningful in its own way. In order to tip the balance in the fighting within their own country, his compatriots needed to encourage other nations to go for each other's throats. Accepting this as the evil that it was, they continued to wield the hammer of justice. Eventually, he had seen so much that he no longer felt the evil, and then he no longer even felt the justice. Ever the consummate soldier, he was too grounded in harsh reality to deceive himself with flowery words or abstract ideas. Everything that he truly understood, he'd come to realize while on the battlefield. And one thing had become completely clear. The fighting that raged through his homeland would not end during the lifetimes of his generation. His own existence was nothing more than a blip on the battle radar, a tiny detail in the midst of something vastly larger than himself. Bit by bit, his once rigid faith gave way to something more nihilistic. Times changed, and so did values. At some point, the human heart went on to change as well. His changed convictions left him alienated, and he reformed himself, into a solitary soldier. He longed for battle, yet felt no commitment to any particular conflict. And so, despite his legendary record in the uniform, he became a mercenary, outside the military establishment. His compatriots began to view him as nothing but a warmonger who fought without beliefs, and they were not so far from wrong. No longer a true partisan of any cause, what he was much harder to define. Ultimately, he was a jack of all trades. Recruit training, guarding VIPs, intelligence operations, subversive activities, he tackled them all. One thing led to another, until he arrived at the last major job he'd undertaken as a soldier. The theater was the Iraq War. There was a battle on the fringes, unrelated to the main conflict itself. And there he'd found a girl who had lost everything, her kin and community all victims of collateral damage. The tragedy that struck her had unfolded in a single day. When Siam found her, a chance discovery as he was making his way through the area, it was a miracle she was even breathing. According to the reports, the entire population of the village had been annihilated. Friend or foe, there were no possible survivors. And yet Siam had found one. He had taken on this war, and that included aiding any civilians once the fighting was over, even if he knew it was someone unlikely to last much longer than another day. And yet, in defiance of his expectations, the girl clung desperately to life. She pulled herself back from the brink of death, pierced her broken psyche back together, and declared that she wanted to live. Easier said than done. This child had no relatives, and all records of her family had been wiped out. In order for her to live, she would need to be reborn as a soldier. There probably isn't anyone around with the patience to train a complete novice. I wasn't qualified, but I wound up sticking with you. Perhaps because something fascinated him about this new responsibility, he took on the task. To say that the girl wasn't soldier material would have been an understatement. On a scale of 1 to 10, she was less than a 0. Her personality was an issue. She was whimsical, unable to keep her emotions in check, and incapable of working as part of a cohesive unit. Her general knowledge and awareness of local customs were also sadly lacking. She could read and write, but there was something fundamentally broken about how she processed information. She called the sun blue? At first Siam figured she'd simply been taught the word blue to refer to what most people acknowledge as yellow. It wasn't long before he was disabused of this notion. The girl wasn't wrong. Everyone else was. The things she said weren't untrue, from her perspective. To her, the sun did look blue. She was still able to distinguish the color yellow from blue, the same as everyone else, but she had a very peculiar condition. Very rare, but known to humankind for centuries. Synesthesia. Dragon Ace called it! She was just like us, except in how she perceived the world. Words would come to her as shapes, sounds as smells, moods as colors. Usually, people who have synesthesia, like, they have crossover. I thought it was just of 2 senses. Like you could see sounds or something. I didn't think it was like all of this. That's gotta be insanely rare if that's the case for anybody. It had isolated her within her own village, and thereby saved her life. That isolation was also why she had no initial aptitude for soldiering. She struggled to work within an organization, as those around her struggled to understand how she operated in a group environment. Sam had no doubt she was the only soldier he'd ever trained who could make eye contact with another person, and instantly understand where they fell short, and what she could do to make up for it. Running her in a standard squad was almost impossibly difficult. Siam soon found that he often needed to give his new novice his undivided attention. You still afraid of guns? In terms of trained reactions and physical skills, there was nothing more that he could teach her. She'd mastered shooting and all the fundamentals of his standard physical training. And yet she was still an astoundingly timid girl. Afraid of the battlefield, afraid of guns, afraid of the trigger. She even seemed afraid of loading a magazine. Every day, Siam found himself thinking, she wasn't cut out for this. But every day, she threw herself back into the training, facing all the things she feared. Revenge, she began to suspect. No doubt she wanted the ability to fight so that she could strike back at the nameless bunch who had taken her village and her family away from her. She wants to be like me, Siam thought. She wanted to kill. No, she wanted the strength to be able to kill, and then immediately to put that killing behind her. You don't have to be afraid of guns, you know. You fear death because you've known safety. Leave the fear behind. You need to conquer your past, but you also can't forget that safety does exist in this world. She was still a respectable human being, not a soldier. He and she were cut from different cloth. Realizing that made him wonder if there was anything he could truly teach her. Sharpshooting is all about fundamentals, he said. Fire only at targets within range. Fire from cover. Fire first. That's it. Easy to remember but hard to pull off. Make it your own. Oh, and one other thing. If you do get into a gunfight, make sure the other guy never gets back up again. She wanted it, that much was clear, and while she might never make much of a rank-and-file soldier, there were better things for her to do than learn regulations and squad tactics. She could survive best on her own. Away from the conventional battlefield, she began to achieve startling results on extreme solo missions. The more skilled her opponent, the more she rose to the challenge. She was a natural-born duelist. No, that wasn't quite right. The girl was an assassin. Sam had to admit that she'd improved each and every day. The almost daily change of pace was good for him, too, as a teacher. The only problem was the source of her motivation. You're still thinking about revenge, aren't you? She fell into her typical sullen silence, a scolded child, unwilling to tell a lie. Inwardly, Sam acknowledged his misstep in judgment. She might have the makings of the perfect assassin, but the assassin's life would never be a good fit for her. Good, he said. Hold on to your vengeance. Repay the insult to your people, but don't stop there. You're capable of much, much more. Don't become a machine stuck repeating the same motions. Take the easy way out. Give yourself over to hatred, and you'll die inside. Maybe there were no more physical skills to teach her, but he still needed to give this girl the mental training a warrior required to survive. Remember this, Kanan. Hatred for its own sake is meaningless. If your hatred isn't tempered by a sense of duty, you will be lost. That lesson, more an admonishment, was the one thing he'd held on to in the wake of his own disillusionment. His heart bore scars that would never heal. Revenge was a prize without reward, claiming it could break you if your heart was made of anything less than steel. And so he told her to harden her heart into something that could not be broken. He only hoped it was enough. Even steel wore away over time, bit by bit. A year had passed since then. A year that felt like a day. Now one thing in particular rose in his mind. Before this job, for perhaps the first time over, Kanan had asked him for something. She wanted a tattoo just like his. He had no choice but to agree. There had still been one day to go before the job, so he'd gotten it done on location before boarding the train. The tattoo, a snake, represented bad luck and loneliness to the locals. She didn't care. She saw it in a kindred spirit. A creature driven by the same nothingness that fueled herself and Siam. The timid girl and the black snake. If he gave himself over to sentiment, he might have said that the black snake looked somewhat uncomfortable there, coiled on this arm of this girl bent on survival. That's pretty cool. Kanan and Sadaka slithered silently along the underside of the train, suspended just above the ties hurtling the paths beneath them. The slightest mistake, and whoever made it would be instantly reduced to an unrecognizable smear of meat. I know, man, I've seen Bacano. Hey, Sadaka hissed. Pick up the pace. She was taking point. Kanan silently complied. She concealed her foul mood, but not so well that Sadaka couldn't see it. Clearly she didn't like their chosen route. Would you prefer the roof, Sadaka asked? Kanan rolled her eyes. The roof is deaf. But you did lie. This is no circus. Heh. Sadaka let out an appreciative chuckle. Had the little princess been expecting some more elegant means of reaching their target? If this doesn't suit you, I guess you'll just have to play King Kong next. You like the Empire State Building, yeah? I don't know what you're talking about, Kanan said, but you're making fun of me, aren't you? Of course! Shooting the breeze like this is so delightful. Normal small talk is just a bother, but when you can mouth off in a situation like this, you'll never be bored. Huh. Kanan furrowed her brow. She might not ever find it in herself to like Sadaka, but it did seem that they shared a very quirky sense of humor. The doors of the freight car were shut with combination locks. It seemed like an outdated technology for the classified material the car was carrying. Evidently the enemy had been forced to make use of what they had available. Sadaka quickly punched in the numerical sequence and the lock opened. She had acquired the code sequence before arriving on the train. Due diligence for a code breaker. Huh. What? That's their security? Sadaka said as they stepped into the car. I was expecting a crowd inside. Either they're really confident or complete idiots. The break-in had been disappointingly easy. They surveyed the freight car's interior, still anticipating a further challenge. The space was divided into two compartments. One was sealed and held the item they were after, while the other, in which they now stood, housed a console room for managing the first. Can you see through the observation window, Sadaka said? That's what we're after, in that case there. The object itself is small. It was made at Fort Detrick. Apparently, Mossad struck a secret deal with the U.S. Biological Warfare Experimentation Unit deployed in Iraq and got them to hand it over to the Israelis. A U.S. Army installation in Frederick, Maryland. The 5-square-kilometer grounds are dotted with various biological and medical research and development facilities. The name is sometimes used to refer specifically to the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, a key institution in U.S. efforts to protect against naturally occurring microbes and diseases, as well as biological weapons. You know, I get the feeling that, like, Kanan said she died twice, right? Is this one of those times? Is Sadaka, like, Alphard, and we just had no idea? Because I'm not seeing how this train mission is otherwise going to be relevant to present day. Not to mention, Alphard is quite the codebreaker. Based on what I was told, it'll be in something the size of a briefcase. Kanan mused. So we just bust the door down and smash open the case? I was advised not to break anything, so we go in like we belong here, open the case, and get out before anyone's the wiser. You just sit tight. You're part of the job, assume there'd be guards. The rest of this is my area of expertise. You can work that console? I brought my own, but what a mess. Sadaka scowled at the slapdash array of electronics. Talk about a headache. Look at all these exposed cables. Is this someone's idea of a joke? I was looking forward to a challenge, but this is low-budget internet cafe level. Sadaka grumbled as she hooked up her laptop. The security here was laughable, even considering how much of a rush the enemy had been in to arrange this weapon transfer. It looked like she'd need to do a little more than input the password that Sheik had given her into the terminal. It's like they're not worried about counterintelligence at all. Are the Israelis seriously this lax? You know, Israeli IT engineers are supposed to be better than this. How could this level of idiot strike a deal with the U.S. military? Or are both sides this dim-witted? Come now, Kanan murmured. You like the Pentium M, don't you? A CPU released by Intel, originally developed in Israel. Its design focused on power conservation for use in laptop computers, its compact size and brand appeal making it popular in many countries, including Japan. How could I not? Israeli engineers are the coolest. Kanan frowned. She might be loath to admit it, but their opinions really were very similar. So I wonder if this means Siam's a traitor too, or if he's just gonna get killed. The PC booted up. Sadaka logged into the terminal and entered the password. She worked with a skill and alacrity that would have made any codebreaker proud. By the time you get to the hacking stage, the job is practically over, she said. The days of having to decrypt things on site are largely in the past. Quite frankly, there's no better way to break through security than social hacking. Social hacking? Kanan asked. What's that? It's sort of like detective work. Getting information in ways other than relying on computer know-how and programming techniques. Nobody knows more about the security of a site than the people responsible for it, so you negotiate with them, run surveillance on them. Even root through their trash, Sadaka explained. There were only 3 people involved with security on this job, so it was a breeze. Normally, for something with this level of secrecy, I need keys from 10 or more people, and hey, let me have one of those sugar things. I need something to put in my mouth. Kanan frowned, but handed her a sugar stick. Disable emergency. Did that say, like, alarm? I swear to God that said alarm. So then, why did they call you a codebreaker? Kanan asked. Aren't you basically just an on-site troubleshooter like me? What are you talking about? Sadaka asked. Well, my point is simply that people are easier to hack. She continued working at the keyboard as she spoke. Ideally, that'd be how you get all of what you need, but it's not doable in practice. Besides, social hacking is all about plugging in numbers, too. You're just wasting your time researching someone's emotions, personality, and history if you don't find a way to turn the results into numerical form. When you're done, you arrange the info you've gotten, and the way to derive, say, a password becomes self-evident. She'd unlocked the 3rd layer of security as she spoke. There was the access password, an infrared scanner lock, and then a lock linked up to the wheels of the train that prevented the compartment door from being open while the train was in motion. Alright, that's done, she said. See, the thing we're after is still a prototype, so I can log in under one of the researchers' names. Then I can use the research lead's account to give me the admin rights and... What the... Is something the matter, Kanan asked? Huh. They've changed the passcode. I tried the 3 highest priority ones I had, but none of them worked. Well, what does this mean here, 1 hour remaining, Kanan asked. It means passcode input has been locked out for another hour. Even if any of the other passwords I have are valid, the system won't let me enter them anymore. They were running out of time. Already 15 minutes had passed since they'd begun to operation. Come on. Allowing for 5 minutes to get back to Siam's car, they only had 10 minutes or so left to work. They up and changed the codes before loading. Damn it. I should have known they'd mess up their update schedule along with everything else. Classic. Is there anything else we could try? Maybe, Sadaka said. Since we can't get access to the passcode, we could try sending the unlock sequence directly to the lock itself. No, that's impossible. The sequence itself is encrypted and stored in a program, so there's no way for us to get to it. Kanan murmured. Can you open the program itself? I can, but there wouldn't be any point. Humor me, I'm curious. Switch places with me real quick. Don't you get it? You can't get the sequence with a string of numbers in there. Well, we could if we had the time, but that'd be days of work and... Ah, this must be the sequence here, Kanan said. Blah blah blah. Give that a try. The hell? Did that work? If it did, I get to have what's inside. Sadaka swallowed wordlessly. She should have been happy. The first stage of her job was finished after all. Still. Synesthesia, she said. I read about it in the report. Is that how you did that just now? It's just a different way of understanding things. I can see what colors the numbers and letters are. That's your explanation? You just see things differently? You're telling me that you intuited that code just by seeing how all the numbers looked? Synesthesia. A curious condition found in people all over the world to varying degrees. It was defined as the tendency to experience the stimulation of one sense with additional perceptions in one or more other senses. Human beings have 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. People who process 2 or more of these individual senses simultaneously are known as synesthetes. Letters could have colors, sounds might have shapes, a word might taste sweet or sour. There were many variations, each a unique way to perceive the world. The condition was not generally an impairment. A letter's color could have real meaning. There was a reason that each sound had its particular shape. Synesthetes picked up on this additional sensory information not intellectually, but intuitively. It went beyond vision and hearing simply working as a combined sense. It created a new form of perception in its own right. The senses themselves didn't literally fuse into one, of course. For a synesthete, the 5 senses could complement each other reciprocally. For instance, visual information might also be processed as sound and then combined with direct auditory input. Visual cues that were also seen through the other senses could radically increase the seer's ability to comprehend what they were seeing. A typical image on a page serves as a good example. The ordinary person perceives such an image solely through the sense of sight. A single input, a single level of perception. A synesthete, however, might perceive the same image with 1 or more additional senses as well. Information obtained this way is analyzed by the brain, the secondary perceptions complementing and deepening the information provided by the primary sense. The human brain, however, cannot fully grasp such perceptions on a logical level. In the end, the beneficiary of such experiences simply knows what has been perceived, without knowing the reason why. It is akin to the experiences of a newborn child. The child has not yet learned language, and so it struggles to grasp its mother's intent when she speaks. An entity without intellect exerts all of its physical self to learn of its surroundings. The nascent brain has not yet separated the language cortex and the visual cortex. In an infant, both function as the same thing. Once these features do become separate, knowledge, as we know it, first comes into play. The organization of knowledge in different regions of the cerebral cortex efficiently reduces certain burdens of the brain, but at the cost of reducing sensory acuity. Seeing the big picture, understanding the details simply by feeling. Not following an ordered thought process, but arriving at its conclusion in a single step. Such possibilities might include picking out the meaning of a sequence of digits that appears meaningless at first glance. For one who did not know, intellectually, what part of a tree was the leaves and what part was the trunk, it would still be possible to tell them apart based on their different colors, their different shapes. The simplification of things, the condensation of stories. Instinctually understanding solutions without having to follow some process of derivation. This was how a synesthete like Kanan perceived the world. So even if you don't know what some code or message is trying to express, the color or shapes will let you interpret it anyway, Sadaka asked? Yeah. It's like how when you look at a whole sentence, you can tell which parts are important and which parts aren't. If the text as a whole contains some story, if the programmer's intent was there on the cipher, she could pick up on it in those colors and flavors, feel the touch of that meaning on her skin. Because of her very nature, Kanan could look at a sequence of unknown information and immediately sense which parts were important. She had learned to accept that she couldn't understand the why behind it. I've only been able to do this since about 2 years ago, though, she said. Before that, I could only feel things in my skin. But now I can do the same with sounds and smells, which lets me see better than before. Well, they say synesthesia is something you're born with, Sadaka said. So does some kind of accident or treatment make you stronger? You know, such as... Her faculties hadn't improved through random happenstance. Perhaps when she was on the brink of death, some of her bodily functions had broken in order to keep her alive, and had somehow changed while she recovered. They say creatures with unusual tactile acuity pick up information on their surroundings through waves. Are your perceptions something like that? Sort of, maybe? I'm not really sure, but I can see my surroundings almost as if they're made of waves when I want to. So then you can tell what I'm doing now, Sadaka asked? Yeah, I can see the scent of you shrugging your shoulders. I can see the scent, Sadaka thought. So that's what using your whole body to perceive things is like. This girl had eyes pointing in every direction. She was a veritable sensory prodigy. She had no blind spots. You know what this means? At the end of the true ending of Shibuya Scramble, no wonder Alphard got so nervous when Kanan got the drop on her, cause goddamn. Her ears and nose, her tactile sensations, saw on every side at once. That's quite a gift you have, Sadaka said. Like a sixth sense the rest of us lost somewhere along the way in exchange for intellect. Maybe it wasn't so remarkable after all. It was something all human creatures had once possessed, an early gift, taken away from them by the serpent of primal knowledge. Progress, not regression, had cost mankind this capability. Sometimes true evolution necessitated the loss of some superior power in order for a species to thrive. Humans had grown more complex through language, culture, and thought, the only creatures on Earth that distanced themselves from their animal nature. And what was it they had lost? The trick of knowing only answers at a look? To receive an answer without thinking, that was nothing more than the abandonment of thought. You're a primitive, basically. Sadaka smirked inwardly at the thought. This girl was such a simple creature. No wonder Siam's Edge had dulled from having to deal with this. Status? The sudden sound of the radio snapped her back to attention. They had under 5 minutes left to go. No problems. Things went a little bit awry, but the young lady here managed to resolve it. Roger that. Try to hurry. The guards have started harassing passengers here. Something about a spy. We got 2 minutes tops. Same as ever then, Sadaka replied. We'll be back before the firing squad lines up. She stared at the briefcase-like container in the open compartment. It really is portable then. I've already confirmed the contents via the terminal. I know it's unwieldy, but would you mind carrying that case, young lady? And whatever you do, do not open it. No matter what. One misstep and every living thing for miles around dies. Wait, what? Kanan said. Siam, she radioed. I forgot to ask. What are we acquiring here? One of the smallest, most sinister weapons in the world. Hey there, Barry. There was a brief silence, but Kanan already knew what his words implied. A chill ran up her spine. She could feel the latent threat before her now. Sam, this is... a virus, designated Risk Group 4 by the American CDC, their highest risk rating. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a multidisciplinary research institution under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. In Atlanta, Georgia, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, it's known as one of the world's foremost organizations in the field of virus and infectious agents research. Secret experiments were carried out to disseminate and infect people with it in order to demonstrate its lethality, and then its genetic code was tweaked to increase its efficacy as a bioweapon. They call it UA Proto. That was it. That was the name of that fragment of hell that had brought ruin to her life 2 years earlier. Oh, so does Kanan defect then? I thought Alphard was going to betray her, but maybe Kanan's the one who betrays them. UA. A microscopic demon released by mankind. It was the year 2000. A retrovirus awoke in the Drakensberg region of South Africa. A type of virus that reads genetic data and uses reverse transcriptase in order to copy its own RNA. Put more simply, it uses the cells of other organisms to make copies of itself. Because of the retrovirus genome is made of RNA, retroviruses are thought to be more unstable and prone to mutations than DNA viruses. Sudden mutations. A mountain range in South Africa that takes its name from the Afrikaans words for the Mountains of Dragons. Part of the range forms the national border of the Kingdom of Lesotho. Its highest peak, at 3,842 meters, is Tabana Mtslenyana, which means beautiful little melt in the Sesotho language. Deforestation carried out in the name of the advancing national development unleashed the pathogen upon the land, rapidly infecting a local village. The virus's combination of a high lethality rate and a high infection rate wiped out the entire village in a matter of days. The South African government carried out radical sterilization procedures, burning down the forest in a several-kilometer radius. Luckily, the virus was still vulnerable, and the sterilization effort proved successful. Until 3 years later, when agents from another nation collected samples of the virus from the same woodlands and began research on military applications. They improved the virus and successfully created a weaponized prototype. The demon awoke. It chose a village already engulfed in the flames of war as a test site. Under cover of the conflict in Iraq, the weapon makers carried out their experiments. The virus was unleashed, and the village vanished. The lethality rate was over 90%. The infection rate and survivability of the pathogen both exceptionally high. This was the tiny demon, invisible to the naked eye, that had taken everything from the young girl called Kanan. After that, there were rumors of further development. The improved form of the virus was given the name UA, and the last of the prototype that had destroyed that nameless Middle Eastern village was frozen. Yes, frozen. Not disposed of, not eradicated. The weapon was difficult to use, but those who possessed it still felt that there was value even in the inferior prototype. Furthermore, it represented a great deal of research money. Which meant, whoever it might be, should a buyer emerge, they would sell. Kanan had no words. Why was this thing here, now? She felt nothing. No grief, rage, or despair. She simply thought, calmly, someone is still alive who was willing to use this weapon. That includes the soldiers who are here to protect it. Hey, young lady. I know. Right now we need to get this case to Siam. She spoke, she moved mechanically, removing the case from its compartment. Whatever free will she possessed a moment before had vanished. Sadaka watched her, satisfied. Then both girls stiffened with alarm. A message appeared on the monitor. Case connection broken. Security breach possible. If this connection is unresolved after 60 seconds, alert broadcast will commence. You didn't disable the alarms? Kanan snarled. Complain later. We'll never get it reconnected in time. Call Siam, now! The call was brief and the conclusion was clear. The parameters of the job had changed. A fight was unavoidable. They would need to strike first. Siam, Just listen, I'll neutralize the guards in the rear car. While I do, keep pressure on the ones up front. Once I secure the rear, I'll give you the signal to fall back. For the time being, Kanan and Sadaka were trapped. There were 7 hostiles ahead of them and 7 more behind. All the girls could do now was set up in the freight car to buy themselves time. And yet... I think this calls for a more aggressive solution. Kanan, wait! Cut the connection. Her eyes gleamed with menace. This was no time for hesitation. This was time for battle. You? Alone? Sadaka was incredulous. Are you out of your mind? Having confidence in your skills is one thing, but be realistic. There are 7 soldiers out there. I know that, but these guys aren't as good as Siam. Kanan was all action. There was no room for emotion. She'd analyzed her problem, and now she was going to solve it. I can't have you dying on me, Sadaka said. You're a very valuable asset to this organization. Oh, never mind. It was clear the conversation wasn't going to be a thing right now. The gleam in Kanan's eyes was that of a beast on the hunt. Give me the case. I'll get it to Siam. I'm used to working with them. If we can catch the guards in a pincer attack, we can end this quickly. Kanan paused. Near as she could see, Sadaka's words didn't have the color of a lie. She was a codebreaker, forced by the situation to fight.
落とすね
Alright, she said. Try not to drop it, and be careful not to get in Cyan's way.
そちらも
Same goes for you. Don't try to prove anything out there. If things get dicey, get out. She could smell combat. The sound of the wheels and the color of the wind were now both a frigid blue. Honestly, Katie murmured to herself, if it was going to come to this, what do we even need her for anyway? Sadaka's color bothered her far more than that of the forthcoming slaughter. Right then, Cyan murmured. The car had devolved into chaos. Guards barked out orders, forbidding anyone to leave their seats. They brandished their guns as they interrogated one traveler after another. The passengers were quaking with fear. While the train was passing through a country, the local government held police authority on board. The soldiers bullying the passengers were Jordanian, Sam could tell, having come aboard during their freight car rearrangement, I should say. He counted them among the 14 hostiles. It was only a matter of time before they realized that Kanan and Sadaka were no longer in their seats. Yeah, that's true. Guess it's time to get started. Sam let out a sigh of resignation. Hey, you there, back in your seat. Damn. Now things were getting interesting. Sam walked wordlessly toward the front of the train. It was clear that wherever he went, death would follow. The other passengers scrambled toward the back of the car. No chance for another surprise attack this time. These soldiers were already ready for combat. They'd pull the trigger as soon as they had a target. It was 1 against 6 now. If he played this by the book, Sam wouldn't stand a chance. Rule 1 was always shoot from cover. It was the first lesson he taught his students. The thing was, rules were made to be broken. So much for playing it by the book. Fastening the top button on his custom bulletproof coat, he strode forward. I am a wall. Walls feel no pain. He opened the door. Bullets ricocheted all around. He paced his enemies, assessed their firepower. He might get injured, but he was confident he wouldn't go down. God damn, dude. Right now, there were only 2 guards in the dining car ahead. Time to improvise. Barging in on dinner like this? Where are my manners? His innards were hurting, his bones creaked, but he fought to keep his aim steady. He had some internal bleeding, but nothing he couldn't power through. Sorry, never was housebroken. He took another step forward. Reckless, maybe, but if he didn't deal with these before reinforcements came, well, no point worrying about that now. Not when there were people left to kill. And just like that, he was down to 3. The worst was yet to come, and his body would bear the brunt of it. Still, Sam was unafraid. He was dead from the beginning, a walking corpse. He'd traded his courage, his passion, for an emptiness without fear. Kanan's heart beat in time with the blaring alarm, but her mind was clear. With mechanical coolness, she considered her orders and the time she had available to carry them out. She inferred the positions of her 7 targets, or she inferred them, I should say. Assessed the potential for a strategy that could overcome 7-to-1 odds and picked her moment. This she did by instinct. Kanan didn't need to think. She let the hard soles of her shoes slap down on the roof of the train car as she ran. That should get their attention. Up top! God damn, dude. They're heading for the engine. Cut them off. The soldiers sprang into action. One of the gangway doors opened. As the leading guard stepped through, a red-clad figure flashed into view on the roof of the adjacent car. Her hair streamed in the wind as the rain raced along at 80 kilometers an hour. This is freaking intense. She fired twice. Her trigger control was flawless, aided by the lightweight slide and short recoil operation of her Beretta. One instant, 2 targets, right between the eyes. trigger control is a shooter's ability to precisely manipulate a firearm's trigger. Though ostensibly a simple movement, it takes considerable skill to break a shot cleanly and quickly reset for a follow-up shot. Good technique is essential for shooting accurately at speed. A type of operating system used in most auto-loading pistols, as well as some machine guns. The mechanism uses recoil generated by the weapon's firing to quickly load the next round into position. That's so clever. It should have been 3. The strike should have worked. But she only got 2. I failed. She missed her shot at improving her odds to 4 to 1. Or maybe instead of blaming herself, she owed her enemies some respect. They moved well. Hey there, Jeff. At this rate, failure was just a matter of time. She didn't have the firepower to go up against 5 well-armed opponents head-on. At the moment, they were on equal footing, both sides cowering under cover. She'd never be able to pick them off one by one. But sooner or later, the soldiers would realize that they could lay down enough suppressive fire to force her to stay down while some rushed her position. And if she tried to rush them instead, the instant she emerged from behind her seat, she'd fall victim to a hail of bullets. Kanan sighed. For the moment, it was a stalemate. She couldn't see the enemy and they couldn't see her. But then she heard one of the soldiers. No capture necessary, just eliminate. Cover me. The guards were using hand signals, but Kanan could perceive them as sounds. There. The vibration of the guards' movements, the sound of breathing, the scent of gunpowder. That was enough. They weren't on equal footing anymore. Her 5 heightened senses melded into a single potent awareness. The enemy was on her turf now. The angle of the floor and walls, the strength and positioning of the wooden seats, the humidity of the air, subtle cues of friction and impact, there was nothing she could not detect. Her synthetic perception precisely mapped the interior of the car inside her mind, showing her everything she might need to know. This was no vague impression, rough calculation. She had an innate grasp of the exact spatial relationships of everything on this limited battlefield. Now all she had to do was wait for the approaching enemy soldier to reveal the last bit of information she needed. Man down! How the hell did she shoot him from there? She could feel the guard's confusion. Her snapshot shouldn't have landed, yet it had caught the advancing soldier right between the eyes. The survivors were breathing raggedly now, even their lungs betraying their alarm. The unexpected counterattack brought bewilderment, and then a rush of fear. Still, Kanan knew that if she simply tried the brute force approach and charged through the enemy position, she only provoked them into bringing their full firepower to bear. That would limit her options. She needed to modify the parameters of the flight first. Kanan was outgunned, she wasn't going to be able to change that. She might be able to drop one more of them without a quick shot, but then she'd only wind up getting overrun. She had one option left. She could abandon cover, go for broke. She'd either drop 4 targets in the span of a single breath, or she'd be done for. Ha! Had that raspy laugh at hers or the enemy's? The guard's leader took aim at Kanan's forehead, his finger on the trigger. Huh? She picked up the dead man's gun. Not for ammo. To carry out the plan she envisioned, she knew she needed something more than her Beretta. What are you doing? Shoot her! The leader of the guards cried out. The subsequent barrage was too uncontrolled to be called suppressing fire. Gunfire intended to prevent the enemy from moving. Frequently used when the opponent is behind cover, it can be an effective means of gaining a tactical advantage by forcing the foe to remain in a given position. The 4 men fired wildly, trying in vain to follow Kanan's nigh-inhuman movements. Kanan sped away. She could read the ripples of the air, could even predict the movements of the soldiers' muscles, the angle of their gun barrels, the trajectories of their shots. But she knew she couldn't hope to dodge every bullet. But before the storm could strike, she dived out of the door of the car. That's freaking ridiculous. let out a soft sigh as her combined senses became distinct once more. She needed to neutralize 4 targets in the span of a single breath, and that was precisely what she'd done. See, look at that, she said. Now that's what I call a circus. She landed with a flourish back inside the train car. She had cleared out all the soldiers stationed in the forward compartment. They had successfully recovered the payload and wiped out the enemy force. Now her task was to evacuate ASAP. She wanted to check in with Siam, but knew she shouldn't risk breaking radio silence without knowing the situation on his end. He probably doesn't need me to bail him out anyway. She wanted to rush to him, but knew Siam would be disappointed in her if she did. And now that she'd made it forward of the secure freight compartment, alright. Doubling back, oh, that does make sense. Doubling back to the rear of the train only to have to come forward again would be a waste of time. Maybe I should head for the engine and stop the train. With their cover blown, they certainly wouldn't go to Amman, or couldn't. She and Siam would need to get off the train en route and conceal their whereabouts. Probably the sooner the better. The scent shifted. She heard sharp footsteps. She spun around, ready to fire. There was a rustling of clothes, and a new sensation crashed against her skin. This is the last save sequence I'm going to do, because this is extremely long, like way longer than I thought. So, the next thing I get to is going to be either an end or another save, and whatever it is, I'm stopping, because, like, I gotta stop somewhere. Sadaka's arrival had helped put an end to the gunfight in the rear troop compartment. She caught 2 of the guards in a pincer attack, and before the last enemy had a chance to regroup, Siam had managed to gun them down. Reckless as ever, Siam. You know, at your age, you really need to stop letting yourself get shot. Sadaka strolled over to him. Only after confirming that all the guards had been neutralized did Siam finally let his mindset shift from combat readiness to simple high alert. I only did as much as was necessary, he said. I knew you'd show up. I wanted to give them an obvious target so they'd leave their rear exposed. The tension between them eased. It had been years since they'd been alone in the same room together. Still, that strategy isn't like you, Sadaka said. Why didn't you fall back to the next car? That's what you should have done. A tactical retreat, keep them disrupted and on the move. Siam considered. Maybe it really hadn't been necessary to make this car into the battlegrounds. If it had accomplished one thing, it was allowing the fleeing passengers a chance to make it to safety. Don't tell me you finally brought a conscience, Sadaka said, and if she'd read his mind. I'm just thinking about our employer. With our cover blown, the enemy might have been able to ID us. I had to do what I could to make sure you guys wouldn't get a bad reputation with the Liberation Front. If you say so, Sadaka said. So this was all over the UA, which means this little spate of bloodshed from the Israelis for trying to get their hands on some weaponized virus? And we're just meting out punishment to the thieves? I suppose it's a good thing if you say so, but at least a bad taste in my mouth. How so? Neither of us like wasted effort. And look at all the trouble I've put you through. Classic Alphard knife action. Alright, Sam, I'm going to tell you 2 things. First, I'm going to be taking this case. Second, I'm not going to leave anyone alive to know about it. No witnesses, including you. Gunfire and screams echoed from the back of the train. Someone was mercilessly gunning down the passengers who'd fled there for safety. Damn. The Liberation Front only sent 2 covert operatives. I brought more. That's who you're hearing. Going to work. Oh, that's who you're hearing going to work back there. And after you risk yourself to protect those people too. You're betraying the front, Siam rasped. It's not betrayal. The Liberation Front was simply a patron to me. I was just doing Sadaka, really. Well, now the fundamentalists have been beaten at their own armed conflict game. I'd say it's high time we cut ties. One who believes absolutely in a particular religious doctrine, used here to refer to Islamic fundamentalists. These include radical anti-American and anti-Israeli factions who have repeatedly come into armed conflict with the Israeli military. The slaughter continued. Several passengers who hadn't managed to flee to the rear of the train still cowered, trembling in the car where Siam had battled the soldiers. A survival that would take an ironic turn when the butchers doing their work farther down the train reached this car. Yeah, really. She kills off all of her operatives. This doesn't make sense, Siam said. If the Liberation Front gets this bioweapon, they'll become the danger that you've always wanted them to be. Indeed. If I hand this over to the Palestinians, the Israelis won't be able to stand by quietly. But your side is outgunned, and ultimately, you'd be forced to break the seal on this thing to even up the odds. And I can't have that. After all, I'm the one who prompted the US military to sell it off in the first place. Siam let out a hoarse gasp. What I want is rumors, Sadaka continued. Dangerous rumors. A biological weapon the US military was getting rid of, stolen mid-transport in a raid in Jordanian territory. Was the transport arranged by Israeli hardliners? Was the raid carried out by the PLO? Who got their hands on the virus? No one will be sure of the truth. Tensions will rise. That's all I'm after. War is never good. A toy like this needs to be reserved for those who know how to use it properly. This was all a political farce, and an especially poor one at that. Neither the side transporting the weapon, nor the side attempting to steal it, would know where it had gone. Suspicion would beget suspicion, plunging the Middle East further into chaos. Do the Israelis not know about this, Siam asked? Was the UA prototype deal some hardliners working independently? That's right. The desperate flailing of some old fools were backed into a corner. Their leaders must be in a mad rush right now, knowing that their own people have been trying to bring some lethal poison into their house without consulting them. Of course, for them, all this was for the good of Israel. What was that you always said? Faith can be a real nuisance. Siam felt a dark cloud pass beneath his eyes. This operation had been doomed to failure from the start. The Liberation Front had been played like an ode? Key people had been handed the information they wanted, like they wanted it. After that, greed and anticipation had ensured that they'd acted predictably. Seeking his only chaos and confusion, the instigator had used one of the oldest tricks in the book. One who controls and dispenses information in order to achieve political or military goals. As skillfully executed, agitation can sometimes be more effective than deploying a major force. Both military and political organizations around the world regularly employ such methods. And so we die, and the Liberation Front fails to acquire the weapons. Is that the idea? Siam said. There's no need for this. You want to fan the flames of confrontation? Even without a third party pouring on more gas, the fires here aren't going to go out. You're right. Accomplishing that much wouldn't require my direct intervention, but I have other reasons for getting personally involved in this case. Yeah, getting control of UA and getting rid of you. Our fates are connected, Siam. You blame yourself for not stopping the UA experiment 2 years ago. I knew you'd take the bait this time if you knew the virus was involved. And if anyone was going to be able to get rid of you, it was going to be me, right? Though I must admit, you're stupider than I gave you credit for. So this is all just a scheme to protect your secrets, Siam said? And I'm an obstacle to concealing the existence of the weaponized UA? Yes. Though I didn't decide that just now. I'd been thinking about getting rid of you since the very beginning. The very beginning? I only learned about the UA 2 years ago, and we've only known each other for 4. True, but you know too much about me. Not my birthplace, I don't care about that. You know what kind of soldier I am. Siam stared at Sadaka through a haze of pain. Any secret weapon becomes less effective once its true capabilities are known. And she sees herself as a weapon. She'll kill me to maintain her effectiveness. Sounds like I underestimated your need for privacy, he said. So once you're done with me, Kanan's next? She is. I know that she's a UA survivor. She poses the same problem you do. And she survived a viral weapon with a 100% lethality rate. Why and how is she still alive? She'll be able to provide some valuable data. When she'd first arrived on the train, Sadaka had said something cryptic about looking into personnel and looking into a flaw with the weapon. Now it was clear that what she'd meant was that she wanted to gather information about the UA survivor and how the weapon had affected her. From the start, this job had been about nothing more than getting the most she could out of UA. So, you want to use the virus, and you wanted to personally examine the one person who survived it, Siam asked? Is that really all there is to this? That's it, Sadaka said. I hope to be able to bring her back as a live specimen, but oh well. She's a little too exceptional. She wouldn't make for a very convenient sample. She's too caught up in hatred and now she's going to die in vain. Sadaka's radio cracked to life. The rear section is now secured, a masculine voice declared. Should we prepare to withdraw once we're done with the cleanup? Negative. Hold off on that for now. Our people in the forward section are late for the rendezvous. Contact the helicopter and let them know. The sound of gunfire told of 2 more passengers being cut down. Helicopter? Siam croaked. That's right. This train's gonna be derailed, and I sure don't plan on walking home. The Israelis aren't incompetent. I plan on getting out of here as fast as I can. She'd been very thorough. In all likelihood, she planted explosives further along the track. That would have been much simpler than tampering with the train directly. A crash might not completely destroy the train, but it would be enough to eliminate any passengers. If the engine wasn't stopped before it was derailed, there would be no hope of saving anyone who remained alive on board. So anyone at all involved with UA, the people who helped you steal it, even anyone who happened to be on board this train, they're all gonna die. Thorough, if a bit excessive, Siam said. But can you actually pull it off? Don't tell me you're still counting on your little girl, Sadaka sneered. It was a crueler, colder expression than any Siam had ever seen before. She's of no use to me. I thought she might have some promise at first, but her hatred of the virus has made her lose control of herself. It's compromised her abilities. It's disappointing, really. All of your efforts wasted. That's where you're wrong, Siam said. He was dying, but his voice was firm. In the back of his mind there was a whisper. Sadaka had sent some of her men to the engine compartment. Why hadn't they returned? Just what are you trying to say, Siam? Nothing special, just the obvious. People who know fear don't act out of hatred. Kanan, she's not like you or me. The chill between them became acute. She lifted up her gun, taking aim at Siam's forehead. Her expression said it all. This man before her had fallen from grace, and her disappointment had turned deadly. Let me just make one thing clear. I'm not like you, she said. You're right. Because you know what you are? For one fleeting moment, their old connection was renewed. He spoke. She listened, saying nothing, as she had often done so long ago. I've changed my mind, Sadaka said. I think I am going to finish you off. Why didn't you just shoot me in the head to begin with? Because of the jinx. You've been shot so many times, yet by some miracle you've never taken a bullet to the head. Her voice was hollow, as if she'd already put this all to an end. She raised her gun. It's not a miracle, he said. Not getting shot in the head is just why I'm still alive. You and I, we're both just ordinary soldiers. I know that, Sadaka replied. It's just, well, it's just this image I have of you, that's all. Kanan came charging from the adjacent car. In the heat of her fury, she fired wildly, but still managed to knock the gun from Sadaka's hands. Sadaka instantly retreated. She sensed instinctively, to her chagrin, that she couldn't defeat her young rival now. Under the circumstances, this was prey she wasn't ready to hunt. Sadaka clicked her tongue, dismayed at being outfaced by such an impulsive attack. The girl had been so calm and collected before. Somehow she'd been transformed into a creature of pure emotion. A warrior, undefeated, and clearly beyond Sadaka's capabilities. We are having another save sequence, but Meowington said that we were really close to the end. Although it looks like we're close to the end anyway. So I guess I'll let this play out. The scent shifted. She heard sharp footsteps. She spun around, ready to fire her gun. There was a rustling of clothes, and a new sensation crashed against her skin. A volley of bullets whizzed right past her face. But how? A chill ran down her spine. There were enemies other than the soldiers on board this train. This one was dressed as a train engineer. Shaking off a premonition of disaster, she pursued this new foe as he retreated toward the front of the train. Right now, she needed to stop the engine. She followed the enemy who shot at her all the way into the driver's cabin. Whoever the fake engineer was, he was defiant to the last, finally collapsing without a word. Looking around the cab, Kanan saw the murdered bodies of the real engineers, as well as a smashed control panel, which was now clearly useless. The this guy was wrecking the train, Kanan thought, he must not have been in league with the soldiers protecting him. And if there was some third party that he hadn't been aware of, Kanan broke into a sprint. If she'd had a better understanding of how the train functioned, she might have found some way to stop it by force, by destroying someone on engine with it. But she had no time to ponder such things now. Her instincts spurred her into motion. The priorities of the situation had changed. As she raced back toward where she left Cyan and Sadaka, she reflected that she hadn't liked this job from the start. Something about this train just felt wrong, and its mottled colors and bodies ill from the beginning, or had boded ill. Cyan! She ran as fast as she could. The sight of her previous battle and everything beyond reeked with a thick stench of death. Her dread of what she would find was almost overwhelming as she headed into the compartment that held the second group of soldiers. All at once, she saw pure, excruciating red. Violent emotion surged through her as she cut loose with a wild barrage. It was the first time since she'd first picked up a gun that she'd fired without certainty that she'd hit her mark. The bullets found their marks, and several of Sadaka's men fell dead. But how many moments had this bought Siam? Sadaka had vanished toward the rear of the train, carrying the case with her. Kanan didn't even consider following her. Instead, dumbstruck, she dropped to her knees beside her mentor. Her mind couldn't process the situation. Just like a newly hatched chick, Siam told her with the faintest of smiles.
Kanan.
Yada.
She shook her head, not wanting to hear what he would say. I've taken my death wound. You can see that. His voice was calm. She stared at him, silently pleading. No. She kept shaking her head slowly, inwardly imploring him not to die, but unable to put her plea into words. Siam stirred. His consciousness was fading from blood loss, but the face before him was one he recognized. He shook himself back to awareness, recalling the young girl he'd found 2 years before. The memory hardly seemed real. Those days of mundane everyday life hadn't really been his to live.
Kanan,
you need to accept this.
Yada.
No, I can't. I won't. She knelt, still shaking her head as Siam calmly told her what had happened. Sadaka had betrayed them. She had stabbed him and had stolen the case with the bioweapon. The train would soon be derailed and destroyed. The train crew and passengers had been murdered, though there might still be a few alive. They'd failed miserably, and the situation was only getting worse. Sadaka was getting away. I don't care about Sadaka, Kanan wailed. We need to get you medical attention. If we could just stop the bleeding, we could still... That'd be a waste of time. There are other things you need to do. Open your eyes, Kanan. There's nothing special about this. Me and her, we're soldiers. Nothing more. Soldiers toss away their humanity. Soldiers get shot. Did I ever teach you to seek some meaning in that? No, you're wrong. You're not like her, Siam. I don't know what she's like, and I don't want to know, but you're different. You're a good person. Maybe you could be cold, but you're not a monster like her. He had no response to that. Wasn't he a monster? Well, perhaps not. He had recovered enough emotion to feel guilt at what she said, at least. Though that hardly made him human. You need to focus, Kanan. Assess the situation and form a plan of action. Remember, our job is to get that case back, stop this train, and eradicate the UA virus. It wasn't fair. He knew how to press her buttons. Eradicate the UA virus? The very words that would transform Kanan from girl to soldier. Kanan, tell me, what happened at the head of the train? I took down all the guards. The engineer was one of that woman's companions, and he wrecked the control panel, so now we can't use it to stop the train. We'll have to destroy the engine room itself, or maybe use the brakes on each of the individual cars. Were there any other survivors? Nobody ahead of the secure freight car. The only ones alive are you and me. Good. I'll stop the train. You go after her. No discussion. Kanan held her breath. Leaving Siam here, wounded as he was tantamount to letting him die. And why should he worry about stopping the train when they were the only passengers still alive? Kanan couldn't imagine leaving him to spending his final it should be to spend his final moments alone. Kanan looked around. How many survivors? His soldier's edge wiped away her sentimentality. Tell me, Kanan, how many are there? She looked at her downcast eyes. In all their time together, he had never once relied on her exceptional nature. He had never shunned her for being different, always accepted her together with her curse, her gift. Now he needed her help.
3人
There are 3, she said, gazing around, reading the colors of the fallen.
たった 3
Only
人しか
3
いない
people alive.
3人し
Only
か
3. Yes, only 3. Amidst the sea of blood that surrounded them, 3 of the passengers still clung to life.
そう
Yes, that's right, she said. She doubted they had any chance of survival. Even with medical care, probably none of them would make it. But that wasn't how Siam saw things, or how he wanted her to see it.
違う
No, she corrected herself. There are 3 whole people we could save. At that, he nodded. And maybe, just a little, he smiled.
列車は俺が
I'll handle the train.
前決を外し
I'll undo
ブレ
the
ーキをかけ
couplings
る
so that we're able to apply the
こ
brakes.
の体で
I'm
も
pretty sure I've
十
still
分
got
に
the
現
strength
実
to
的
pull
な
that
役割
off.
だがお前の
Your
方
job
は少し骨
is going to be a bit more difficult.
でも
I know,
すぐ
but I'll be right back. Her voice, her emotions under control at last. She was the consummate warrior now, just like he'd trained her to be.
カナン
Kanan,
お前は戦争に
you
よ
were
って過去に奪
victimized,
われた犠牲
your
者であ
past stolen from you by
る
war.
奴は権力闘
She
争に
was
よって過
defeated,
去
her
を
past
失
swallowed
った
up by
敗北者
power struggles beyond her control.
兵士としての起
Your
点は
past as
同じ
warriors
だが
began in similar
あり
places,
方は異なって
but
い
you
る
have walked them in different ways. Siam's gun slid from his hand. It seemed in that moment like a symbol of his life. A hard and deadly weapon, a killer of many, now abandoned.
破壊によって生まれた兵
Soldiers
士
born
は
of
憎し
destruction
みを
make
武器と
hatred
す
into a weapon, Siam
俺と
said.
奴のうつ
That's
ぶ
what
さ
made
は
her and me so empty
単にそ
inside.
れに焼き尽
The
くされた
hatred
だけ
just
の話
burns
だ
inside until all else is burned out.
その話を覚
Do
えて
you
いる
remember what I told you?
覚えてる
I do. You said that hatred must never be used as a means of fighting back. Even if the power it gave you let you destroy your opponent, even if you cultivated such power, it would destroy you too in the end. Hey there, Matt. Well done, he thought. Perhaps he really had managed to pass on all that he could. His lips curled into the ghost of a smile. He'd once said that death was the great equalizer, that it came the same for everyone, no matter who they were. Now Sam's time had come, and Kanan realized with a sudden and surprising calm that she'd accepted it.
最後のタリウムだ
My last request, he said.
奴を逃がす
Don't let Sadaka get away, and save whatever
より
lives
多
you
くの
can.
命を
Yes,
シャム
good fortune to you too, Sam. There was no grieving. They simply parted ways, each reflecting on the past 2 years and needing nothing more than that. This has to be the end. Sadaka stood atop the train. The scenery, a uniform ground for much of the journey, was now dotted with green in places. They were drawing close to the destination she had chosen. Very shortly, the train's usefulness would come to an end. There were less than 2 minutes to go before the rendezvous with the Black Hawk, an assault helicopter manufactured by Sikorsky Aircraft. First saw combat with the U.S. Army during the invasion of Grenada in 1983, and in more recent years has seen service in the Iraq War. It's used by over 20 nation-states, including Japan, Australia, Egypt, and Israel. Sadaka carried the case in her left hand, handcuffed her wrist, and gripped her gun in her right. FN-57. A semi-automatic pistol produced by Belgian manufacturer FN Herstone. Uses the cartridge with high penetration power. Typically sold only to law enforcement and military agencies. However, there are less powerful versions that have been made available to the civilian. The preparations have been flawless. The helicopter pilot was highly skilled. He would lower a ladder to her at her position, and she would simply ride it right on up. She'd accomplished most of what she wanted, and now her retreat would be swift. She should have been wholly pleased with the situation, and yet she was wholly dissatisfied. Of course that would have been the case regardless of the results she'd obtained. It was not in her nature to ever be content. Only by striking out the world around her could she even keep herself sane. And now her thirst for vengeance was worse than ever. Ah, and here she comes. A girlish silhouette appeared on the roof of the train not far away, and Sadaka felt her thirst change to a hunger. Time to go a-hunting. She more than had the upper hand here. If she were to go down, the case would fall down with her. And if the case were damaged, the UI virus would very likely be released. Which meant the little lady couldn't shoot at her until she got the case away. Whereas Sadako was free to unload on her as much as she wanted. The kill was certain to be hers. How could she help but smile? She'd stolen the UA, stirred up both sides of an international conflict, and would soon eliminate the last witness to her scheme. It had been quite some time since she'd last scored such a coup. I suppose I owed the little lady a little thanks for contributing to my success. Her target was 3 cars away. Knowing her pistol's effective range, Sadako gave herself an 80% chance of hitting. If Kanan had been 1 car closer, it would have been 100%. And since it wasn't like the girl could fly, she had no hope of escaping certain death. Sadako aimed at the train car's roof just in front of Kanan's feet. Time for a little intimidation. Let's show this upstart what real skill looks like. She needs to understand that a step closer to me is a step into certain death. Alright, little lady. Let's see how well you dance, like a freaking Clint Eastwood movie. Sam struggled to his feet. He had a final job to do. There were 6 meters and a door between him and the coupling that linked this car to the next. Easy enough under ordinary circumstances. Once he undid the coupling, the automatic air brake would kick in and stop the rear section of the train. A style of brake used by railway cars that utilizes air pressure. All the train cars include sections of a brake pipe linked to each other down the center of the train's undercarriage. The brakes on the cars are structured so that they activate when air is removed from the pipe. If 2 cars become separated, this releases the air, causing the brakes to kick in automatically. The distance seemed vast. How much time was it going to take him to do something as simple as waking up in the morning and washing his face? It was altogether too long and treacherous a journey. A journey that would use up all that remained of his life. So they still haven't disappeared, are they? Muddy memories played in his mind like scenes from an old movie. There was a time when I saw hope in a girl who made nihilism her reason to live. After that, I found hope in another girl's weakness as she clung to her desire to live. The hope Sadako had brought had been like opium, a drug he took to coax himself into thinking his actions were for the best. Somehow at the time, he'd never realized his mistake. And then there was Kanan, a victim of war. She'd given him a kind of hope that brought all his own pain sharply into focus. Even at death's door, she thought nothing of dying, only wanting to live a life of meaning. He had no doubt now which kind of hope was the better one, but he still remembered both, just as he remembered the fate that had driven him long before he met either girl. That was decades ago now. How naive he had been, an unsophisticated firebrand clinging to blind belief. Three wounded passengers, 3 people to save. The thought drove him on. 2 years earlier, he'd been unable to save anyone. He had been nothing but a killer. Did that make him a hypocrite now? Perhaps. But if so, for once he could accept his own hypocrisy. Sam blinked. His eyesight was failing. Maybe it was the light of truth that had blinded him. He was paying at last for the sin of casting aside his beliefs so long ago. Did he have the stamina to keep going? Of course he did. He trained himself to find new reserves of strength when it mattered most. War was always like this. After the mind and body had given out, a true soldier could forge onward on spirit alone, like a servant of the dead. It had been a long time since he'd taken a job that tipped the scales back toward the living. Of course, he'd always told himself that he killed so that he and others might live. Mercy and slaughter stemmed from the same behavioral principle, the struggle for self-preservation. Still, a soldier's deeds seemed to slip inevitably toward the negative end of the spectrum. He remembered how the long slide had started, the motives that had driven him to take up arms and pushed him further and further into the void. I will lose my life now. I will lose this emptiness. At long last, my balance will return to 0. Another memory. Before they'd boarded the train, the girl had begged him for a special boon. Just when that had happened. Exactly. Or when had that happened? You're such a liar, Sam. You said it wasn't going to hurt at all. I had no idea it was going to be this painful. Perhaps at the time, Sam had simply forgotten how painful it was. He'd been good at that, after all. He'd asked her if the pain from her new tattoo would impair her for the upcoming job, and she shook her head. I mean, yeah, it does hurt, Kanan said, but it makes me happy, and that makes me better at what I do. The girl's skills really did change based on her emotions. Her good moods were rare, but when she was happy, her abilities were remarkable indeed. A tattoo was a small price to pay for that. This girl was quite probably the strangest person he'd ever known. Meeting her was an honor for him, in a way. Even while her training made her into a soldier, she never truly let go of her feelings. Maybe she'd been a free spirit the whole time, or maybe her feelings are what helped her through in part. It didn't matter which it was. This shows that we're family, Sam. For as long as I have it, I'll never forget what you've taught me. Remembering it now, he felt a vague sense of fulfillment. For a monster, he'd done a pretty good job. I mean, it's showdown time, so... The two girls stood 30 meters apart. Kanan had stopped... Had stopped? Come on, this isn't the time for that. Kanan had stopped her advance just at the edge of the third car. Sadaka waited, silent. Her rival could never hit her from there. Kanan took one more step. One more, and the real fun would start. The curtain had risen in the final act of the drama. The violent drone of a helicopter sounded in the distance. In a matter of moments, the chopper would arrive. Lowering the ladder, Sadaka would then ascend in triumph. What are you waiting for? She called out. Don't tell me you came here just to watch me go. I thought you were sworn to destroy the virus. Her challenge was a hiss upon the wind. Kanan glared. She knew she could reach her enemy in 5 seconds or less, but Sadaka would need only one of those seconds to aim and fire. Kanan would be killed 5 times over if she charged. It was a risk she couldn't afford to take. She couldn't hope to win, not under these conditions. You really think I just let you go? Kanan called back. Don't be a fool. Sadaka's taunt had stung her nerves. Her rival's voice was like a jagged claw, a filthy talon scratching at her temples. Kanan ground her teeth in frustration. She had no fear of charging in without a plan. But that wasn't going to work this time. That would give too much of an edge to her opponent. This is such a letdown, Sadaka said. But no matter, whatever you do, I'll be able to put the contents of this case to good use. Did you know, young lady, that this UA is a flawed weapon? More a negotiation tool than anything I'd actually use. And why is that, you ask? Because it's too powerful. The ladder swayed down from the helicopter above. Sadaka could make her escape in a moment if she chose. And yet she hesitated, savoring Kanan's defeat. The fact is, it's too early to use the virus as a weapon, she said. It'll take the world's top researchers 2 years at least to fully understand what they're up against. Then the UA will have some real value in my catalog. A pity you won't be there to see that. Your deaths here are really going to accomplish nothing. But don't worry, I'll make sure the UA reaches its full potential. No one may care that it took your parents from you, but one day this weapon will make a brand name for itself. And then I'm going to make a killing. Kanan fought back a wave of nausea. Ferocious colors danced before her eyes. Bark all you want, she said. It's not going to happen. She heard a dull crying from somewhere ahead and felt a faint shudder through her feet. The train began to slow. Strength filled her limbs. She shifted her posture, ready to spring into action. I guess I didn't need to provoke you, Sadaka sneered. She could see it in Kanan's eyes. The girl was ready to run right to her death. Everything was falling into place. The bleak scenery was opening out into a fertile landscape. Kanan was about to die. One step forward and there would be a resounding gunshot. But instead of moving, Kanan spoke. Your name. What is it, really? Sadaka smiled inwardly. So that's what's been gnawing at her. Alphard, she said. Siam wanted his promised land, but all he was able to make me into was just another terrorist. And at her words, the race began. Sadaka, Alphard, stared in surprise. The instant that she realized that her first shot had missed, she pulled the trigger again. This time her eyes went wide with shock.
この距離で
How could I miss at this range? The red-clad figure sped along the train car roof, zigzagging as she moved like a bolt of lightning. On she came, heedless of the death in the air around her. There was no doubt about it. The girl was dodging bullets. For a master markswoman like Alphard, it was a nightmare come to life.
避けるな
No, this is
そんな話が
ridiculous. It can't be. What Kanan was doing simply shouldn't be possible. Just before each shot, she would change her trajectory unpredictably, shifting out of the bullet's path. Evasive movement was a standard tactic, but knowing precisely when and where to dodge? That required an inhuman ability to predict the future. It's like she could practically see the bullets. That simply wasn't possible, was it? Alphard's mind raced. She fought a rising wave of panic. The girl had almost reached her now, but Alphard still held one advantage, the case in her left hand. The girl would have to go for the case before attacking her directly. Alphard would just have to kill her before that. It was simple. Just pull the trigger. And yet, she'd begun to doubt that she could hit Kanan. She struggled to comprehend what she was up against, her mind recoiling as she began to understand the full extent of this demon's powers. Oh, we've had this one before. You don't really think I could see the bullets, do you? Her voice was like the whispers of the devil himself, speaking what was in Alphard's mind. She fixed her opponent with a victorious stare.
言っただろ
I see your hatred. She can see my emotions? Of course. This girl could discern emotions like they were colors. She wasn't looking at the bullets or even at Alphard's movements. She was reading her enemy's expectations. She could tell exactly when Alphard believed that she would hit her mark, exactly when she would fire, and that was precisely when she'd dodge aside. As long as a foe had human emotions, this girl could predict what that foe would do an instant before it happened. Ah. This was it. Kanan was all confidence. She was closing in for the kill.
私も
Of course, Alphard laughed. The only way to ruin her enemy's predictions was to do something wholly unpredictable. Huh? As Alphard hurled the case from the train, Kanan instinctively launched after it. This is like Bacano. So that's why Alphard needs to go find the virus again. Realizing she'd been baited even as she was tumbling through the air, Kanan clutched the case to her chest and rolled to face her foe, reflexively bringing her gun to bear. Bullets whizzed in both directions. For an instant, the two combatants seemed suspended in a kind of distorted balance. Two natural opposites in opposition. One who could sense emotions, and one who could eliminate them. By all rights, they should have been evenly matched, but Kanan's own emotions tipped the scale in her favor. Alphard had let herself get too drawn in, so she had forced herself to swallow her hatred for a moment and fired at the girl as if at a simple obstacle. She would find a color of determination that Kanan could not see. And yet even those shots failed to strike home. Even with her hatred suppressed, her intentions could be read. She would need to discard her hate, to divorce even her will to win from her actions. Only then would she be able to slay this super person. But the girl's bullets also failed to hit. Twisting through the air, fighting to keep hold of the case, she couldn't aim with perfect accuracy. Throwing away the bioweapon had been a split-second decision on Alphard's part. She hadn't spared an iota of consideration for the thousands who might die if the case broke open. Kanan trembled as an evil chill ran down her spine at the sight of Alphard standing on the train. There she saw not another woman, but an angel of death, inorganic destruction made flesh. She rolled as she struck the ground, safeguarding the case with her body. The impact scattered her senses. She struggled to remain conscious as she bounced along, focusing on protecting her precious burden. If it broke open now, everything she and Siam had done would be for nothing. At last she slid to a stop and lay there, panting with exertion. She checked the case before she checked herself for injuries. I did it. The case was intact. Next, following standard protocol, she began assessing her own scrapes and bruises. The train! The grating screech of brakes filled the air. The wheels threw up a shower of sparks along the rails as the train receded. Already the last battlefield they had shared was withdrawing into the unreachable. Siam. There was no sadness. They had already made their farewells. Instead, she felt a grim contentment and a steely pride. Anyone with her abilities could have handled the challenges she'd faced, but Siam had been on the brink of death, and yet he had succeeded at a task that would have been difficult for anyone. He'd finished things as he had lived, a trustworthy soldier to the very end. She had failed to retrieve the UA virus, the train had been stopped, and her test subject had gotten away. Never had she been so defeated. She had killed Siam and stoked the flames of conflict between two opposing camps, but those achievements didn't change the fact that the operation had been a failure. To be denied a single objective was, to her, a crushing loss. Failing on 3 counts was intolerable. Alphard, it's too dangerous to stay here. You need to get the order to withdraw. One of her subordinates was calling out from behind her, but her attention remained focused on a point on the ground far behind and below. It was over. The UA in that case was, after all, only an old prototype. She had other options. There was a pharmaceutical firm already performing research on a superior form of the virus. There was no need to stay and risk capture for the sake of the virus. Take us down, she said. I want to make sure he's dead. But it was hard to take her eyes off the girl. The girl was crawling along the bare earth beside the track, a bitter reminder of her failure. Her thoughts shifted back to Siam. The man had fallen from grace. In the 11th hour, he seemed to have embraced that saying from the Quran, that for whosoever killeth a human being, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind. The central religious text of Islam, consisting of 114 chapters, also frequently romanized as Quran in English, is the most important source for Islamic law, taken as the revelations of Allah to the Prophet Muhammad, compiled by his companions after his death. He'd refused to continue being a tool to that very end. Destroying him was no betrayal. She'd never regarded him as kin. Her decision to eliminate him had been motivated by the simple fact that he'd been in the way. Her way. After all, as he said himself, "You're right, because you know what you are?" She smiled darkly as she recalled his words. You're strong. You've attained a kind of perfection. You don't know failure. You can accomplish incredible things all on your own. But that magnificence is like a sterile room with nothing remaining within. He was right. Yet he failed to understand that there'd never been anything there to begin with. She was an empty shell with no false dignity to protect. She'd never had anything to lose but flesh and blood. Siam should have recognized this. The man was himself a broken being. Alphard had never really been alive. Alphard, you're unstoppable. But if, instead of striving for some empty goal, you could find something that truly matters to you, then you could be so much more. It was laughable, really. Conflict was what mattered to her. That was her driving force. She'd lost her family and discarded her past, retaining only what enabled her to survive. The ashes of her former self were scattered across the world. Every weakness burned away in the crucible of conflict. She couldn't imagine anything but hatred for the rest of humankind. Now her eyes were like fire as she stared down at the girl below. Kanan might still be in range of the right kind of weapon. Hey, do we have any automatic rifles on board? Hey there, Fakafan. Negative. There was no mention of rifles on our orders. I say. Never mind. Looks like this is your lucky day, little lady. Alphard, our ground support intercepted a transmission from Amman Air Traffic Control. A recon chopper has been dispatched from the Badia. We're out of time. You have to give the order to withdraw from the operations area. Fine. Pull out. Head west. The helicopter circled around, then headed westward, passing directly over the girl beside the tracks. As it did, Alphard and Kanan exchanged a silent stare. Boss, you should get that looked at. Yes, of course. Down below, Kanan continued to stare, seeing in her foe a dark reflection of herself. Their origins were so similar. Two serpents born from the same twisted nest, guided by the same mentor, and yet they had followed very different paths. They had no familial ties, yet they were sisters all the same, bound by a fate thicker than any blood. Kanan didn't take her eyes off the helicopter until it had disappeared over the horizon. Her hatred was a potent force, but even stronger now was her sense of duty. She would stop that terrorist. The girl who had possessed no goals had finally found a sense of determination born within her. Real life now? Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin our descent, so we're finally back to the present. Please ensure that your seatbelt is fastened and any electronic devices have been powered off. Kanan stirred. Her eyes slowly drifted open. A long dream receded. She'd be on the ground within the hour. Once the plane had landed, she would disembark by a different route than the other passengers, then board a helicopter that would be waiting for her on the runway. She stretched and resettled, steeling her resolve. After the mission in Jordan, she had gone on to learn of a certain distinguished family wiped out in a political conflict, and how its sole surviving daughter has been trained as a mercenary. But that was a story from the past. It wasn't her story anymore. Right now, she just needed to head to Shibuya, save Maria, and put a stop to the Serpent's actions. That was a fast save. Probably because there's something we could do in that area once this ending is over or something.
Maria.
She resisted the urge to hurry to her destination. Taking out her cell phone, there it is. There it is. She dialed up Maria's number. Now that we've gotten the true ending, I think I actually am allowed to jump. Yeah. But I'll finish this first. She knew it was a pointless act. Surely Maria would be unable to answer the phone. Still, she couldn't resist the urge to try.
Huh?
So, wait a minute. Kanan just takes 2D with her? Because now we're talking to Maria directly. What? Incredibly, the call connected. Kanan gasped as if she'd seen a ghost. Maria! A sound of sobbing came through the receiver. Maria, is that really you? She didn't actually need to ask. Kanan could tell just from the sound of the breathing that it was Maria on the line. She felt a rush of joy. She wasn't too late after all. Thank goodness. Oh, thank goodness. Maria's voice was happy. Her tears were tears of joy. Kanan let out a strained laugh, feeling that their positions had been strangely reversed. Maria had been concerned for her well-being. She heard in her happy sobs the sound of a dear friend who had somehow survived a very long and harrowing day. Maria proceeded to put Kanan on the phone with a man named Jack Stanley, a U.S. operative who had helped to keep Maria safe. In 10 minutes of hurried conversation, he brought her up to speed on the situation. The people of Shibuya had managed to stop the UA virus from running rampant through their city, but there was one worrisome detail. The CIA took Alphard into custody? It was Stanley's superior, Gordon, who had escorted Alphard away. Kanan recognized the name. She was certain that Gordon was one of the Serpent's collaborators. They're extraditing her to the U.S.? Kanan asked, unofficially with no due process? She was appalled at the naivete of the Japanese police. They hadn't arrested the terrorist, they had merely taken her into custody. Thanks to Gordon's interventions, Alphard's whereabouts were now unknown. It would be extremely difficult to track her down. Still, I brought myself an hour this morning that she wasn't expecting. She allowed herself a cautious smile. If Gordon was acting on his own, he'd have to use the airport. She probably had about 30 minutes left to act. For an ordinary person, that'd be a hopeless situation, but Kanan wasn't an ordinary person. At a facility with this many people, this many colors, the color of danger would stand out as clear as day. Alright, she said once Maria was back on the line, leave the rest to me. Once this is all over, I'll head right over to see you. She hung up the phone. Her anxious pacing had ceased, stilled by her steely determination to confront her enemy at last. Honestly, going around pretending that she's me? What an outrageous deception. Something has changed in the Serpent. She was toying with her far more than usual. Alright, if that's how she's going to do things, I'll just have to pay her back in full. It went against Kanan's own sensibilities, but trickery seemed like the perfect tactic to use against these foes. Maria and her companions had been played like puppets. It was time to return the favor. The sound of propeller blades cut into the air. Voices were barely audible beneath the roar as the craft prepared for takeoff. Excuse me, miss? Might you be Miss Kanan? The agent, obviously a last-minute deployment, looked like a nervous wreck. His scent was startlingly harmless. He hardly seemed suited for the job. That's right. You ready to go? Yes, of course. I just, well, I mean, I'm ready to fly, miss.
あなた
This is your first time doing this sort of thing? Yes, my first mission. Thank you, miss. She decided to ignore his bumbling. Her first impulse was just to kick this dolt, but obviously that wouldn't do. Since befriending Maria, she'd become far less inclined to casually strike out at fools who got in her way.
それで
Do you have my firearms ready, she asked. Well, right, the guns. They've been prepared for you, of course, but... Well, how do I put this? Kanan stared at him.
何か問
Is there
題
a
でも
problem, she asked. Yes, it's kind of difficult to say. The situation you see just a little earlier, I heard it was all cleanly resolved. She held her tongue, all part of the act.
解決した
Resolved? It seemed best to feign ignorance just to be on the safe side. The man's color was trustworthy enough, but the hue of the copter pilot on standby was harder to read. An unsightly blue, proof that he'd had contact with the killer. Better play dumb. She couldn't risk blowing this golden opportunity.
ごめん
I'm sorry, but would you mind
説明して
explaining? She asked. Of course. Just please don't be mad, okay? The man explained the situation, profusely apologetic all the while. He told her about the panic that had befallen Shibuya. The existence of UA had been exposed. Alphard had been taken in by the CIA, and Maria Osawa was now under police protection. I see. Well then. Yes, so, I guess this whole journey was pretty much a wasted trip for you, Miss Kanan? He was a man of far too many words. No matter. She could understand his unease. From his perspective, she was an uninvited guest. To the good agent here, she was a meddler trying to usurp the CIA's rightful target. To the helicopter pilot, she was simply a nuisance who had arrived a few minutes ahead of schedule. But the fact was that they were the ones who had no part to play on the stage. None of her plan was going to work, anyhow. Maria and the others had slipped through Alphard's fangs, unexpectedly providing Kanan with one last chance. Now it was up to her to seize it. Looks like Shibuya really was a poor fit for you,
渋谷
terrorist.
との相性最悪
She shrugged off a momentary twinge of self-doubt. Maria had survived so far without Kanan's help. It did seem a bit outrageous for her to get involved now. And this novice agent was right about one thing. Her initial plan for the trip had, in fact, been a total waste. But still, she felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. Perhaps she'd secretly been hoping it would come down to a single desperate encounter all along. Another moment when fate took a strange twist and everything changed, like that hectic day on which she first met Maria. She cast her mind back to their first encounter, that unexpected brightness.
それじゃあサディーク
Let's be friends,
Sadiq,
Sadiki.
no,
How
no.
about it? It felt like so long ago. She'd seen in this wayward stranger a comforting color, a hue that felt inexplicably familiar. And suddenly, after all this time, she realized why. Sure.
そう
All
か
right. How strange that she never realized before. Maria shone with the same color as Kanan's older sister. No wonder she triggered so many memories of youth. Kanan had been isolated as a child, spending more and more time alone with her peculiar senses. Yet she had remained close to her family. It was their warmth that had tied her strange self to the world around her. Maria didn't literally resemble her lost sister, but she had brought her warm color back into Kanan's life. There in the prop wash of the waiting helicopter, Kanan giggled despite herself. She felt ridiculous for only realizing something like this now, but she was glad it had happened nonetheless. Huh? Are you okay, ma'am? The novice agent stared at her in confusion. Kanan nodded reassuringly. Maria was safe for now, but she still had one last job to do.
友人を助け
I came here to save my friend, but since she's okay, I guess this will just be a regular visit. Kanan took the gun she'd been provided, then flashed the agent a girlish smile.
それに
And really, isn't that so much better? Turning away from the hired chopper, she headed for the main concourse like an ordinary tourist. Her long journey was over now. She had finally found something stronger than hatred. Isn't that right,
そう
Siam?
でしょ
Their parting seemed ages ago, now. But she lived up to the training he had given her, to be a warrior, to live for something greater than revenge. That training had gotten her to where she was now. She would not be something hollow, like the serpent. She would hold her head high, strive to meet Siam's ideal, and fight for the future.
さ
We've had one last
Last
game to
game.
play, Alphard.
あ姉と妹
My old rival. Let's see which of us snakes will survive in the end.
決着
She had come to protect Maria, the friend who'd shown her how to hope again. Now it was time for a final showdown. It was time to make that hope a reality. feels a little strange that it just ended right there, because the true ending had Alphard and Kanan actually face each other. So I would kind of like to see what happens. This entire thing was a prequel, and I knew that. But I thought we would end where the true ending left off. Then again, something might happen after the credits, I don't know. But god damn, that was long! Like, Jesus Christ, like the other endings were like 30 minutes. This is freaking intense. And again, I can't skip this. So we'll see where it goes. But what I do know is that my next goal, unless I feel like having a little diversion and doing bad ends or something, my next goal is to go back to Suzune's ending and to this ending and jump to Achi and Maria respectively, because those will lead to what it takes to unlock a fourth ending, because there's regular ending, true ending, Suzune and Kanan, so actually a fifth ending. This game has, I think, 7 full endings, and there's like a million bad ends. There's like 85 bad ends or something, but this is 7 full endings. So this was number 4, but as you can see, they tie into each other. The normal one is non-canon, I guess, because there's the true one, but the Suzune ending and the Kanan one tie into this. Although Kanan's ending was actually a beginning. But, so we'll see where this goes. Perhaps there's more stuff to tie into other things. Developments, Type Moon. I guess maybe because of the animation? Yeah, the end with different font. The Solitary Circle. Hooray, did it! Jesus Christ, that was a lot, but we did do it. What's in the bonus content? Is it just like the preview for Kanan's thing? Maybe that's it? Does it still... Yeah, I guess that undid it. Just the fact that I went in did it. Good enough for me. Alright. In any case, we have another ending to go for, which is going to be back in the 3D world. Oh my god, but I'm definitely ending now because this was insanely long, even though it was kind of cool to look at. So thank you very much for joining the stream, and have a wonderful night.